Hello, this is Ashin. Welcome to part 2 of What if Naruto had Voodoo Reese and became S rank at 7? If you haven't watched part 1 yet, make sure to check it out first. The link is in the description below. Well then, sit back, relax, and enjoy listening.
I, the fourth Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, have determined that following the unfortunate war inflicted upon our village, the very same war we decisively won, Konoha will officially cancel all reparations previously demanded of your nations. In exchange, we mandate an absolute, unbroken 10-year peace. Humph, such a foolish maneuver, Onoki scoffed. I have lived long enough to realize peace pacts are merely papers. But, since you are canceling the reparations, I certainly don't mind it, the old Tsuchikage finished with a raspy chuckle. That is acceptable, Lord Hokage, Yagura stated simply, while I gave a stiff, begrudging nod of agreement. I know you are a good man, and I truly admire you for it, too San. But those uncultured brutes do not deserve your mercy, Naruto told his father as they walked the dirt road back to Konoha. They will just break the pact the second we lower our guard. Minato remained perfectly calm, his blue eyes focused steadily on the path ahead. I must do what I can, Naruto. Even a small chance of peace is worth it, if it means giving our people a generation without war. Naruto frowned deeply, shoving his hands into his pockets. You know, that prophecy might not even be true. Half the time, they say that old Toad has dementia. Minato chuckled softly, a warm, knowing sound. We will see, Naruto. We will see. 12 years old Naruto. Naruto stared in absolute silence at his father. The man he admired more than anyone, the person he loved most in the world, was lying dead on the cold metal table, a small, peaceful smile forever etched onto his face. When Garotora appeared before me, I came immediately. Naruto slowly turned his head toward the morgue's doorway, his hollow gaze landing on Jiraiya. Tears were freely streaming down the Sannin's cheeks. I'm glad you are here, sensei, Naruto muttered, his eyes drifting painfully back to his father's still form. This shouldn't have happened. The prophecy. Naruto. The prophecy. Father was the one. You kept talking about a fake prophecy this whole time, Jiraiya-sensei. Naruto suddenly snapped, his voice cracking under the crushing weight of his grief. Jiraiya squeezed his eyes shut, his own voice trembling. It is not fake. But it was not Minato. Naruto said absolutely nothing. Moving with a numb slowness, he leaned over and pressed a lingering kiss to his father's cold forehead, and then stepped over to do the exact same to his mother. Without another look, he turned and walked right past Jiraiya, pausing only for a fraction of a second at the doorway. The child of prophecy is dead, Naruto stated, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. Tell that senile toad to stop spitting bullshit. Flashback end. Sometimes, I see him sitting alone before the fire, just holding father's tri-pronged kunai. He just sits there, crying silently, Narumi muttered, staring blankly at the rippling water before her sensei. Jiraiya frowned, a deep, heavy sadness settling over his aged features. He loved his father so much. He would have gladly burned the whole world down for him. I have never seen such fierce, absolute admiration and love from anyone in my entire life. Really? Narumi asked softly, leaning in slightly, desperate to know more. Jiraiya nodded, a wistful, melancholic smile touching his lips. When Minato first became Hokage, Naruto essentially took control of the shadows. Every single thing passed through him before it ever reached Minato's desk. He completely disbanded the entire Anbu Black Ops force and meticulously reformulated it from the ground up, just to ensure absolute, unquestionable loyalty to your father. Wow. Narumi breathed, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief. But he was only 10 years old. Jiraiya let out a long, heavy sigh, his gaze drifting out over the water. When someone possesses the power to crush you in a single moment, you tend to forget about his age. I never expected all this. He always seemed so soft to me, Narumi murmured, still trying to process it all. He became soft, Jiraiya corrected, his voice tinged with heavy nostalgia. Back then, he was still a nice guy, but he was utterly terrifying. He paused, glancing down at her. He didn't even wear a Hokage haori similar to Minato's, purely to make sure that specific style remained exclusively your father's. What about the Hiraishin? Narumi asked softly. He knew better. To him, there is only one yellow flash, Jiraiya explained with a fond, knowing smile. That is exactly why he never bothered to learn the technique himself. But maybe, you will. Narumi just nodded silently, staring back out at the rippling water. You still style your hair the exact same way, Naruto said, his gaze fixed softly on the dark-haired woman beside him. He had decided to take things slow, wanting to spend as much time with her as possible. When morning broke, they had opted to simply walk the dirt road back to the village rather than rushing through the canopy. I have always loved it. Shizune blushed slightly, returning his smile. As do you. Naruto smiled, casually running a hand through his bangs. It is father's hairstyle. I don't think I will ever change it. Oh, Shizune murmured. Eager to lift the sudden melancholic atmosphere, she stepped closer and warmly looped her arms around his. Well, you grew taller too. Way taller. Naruto chuckled, his tone suddenly shifting into something far more teasing. I think we both expected that a long time ago. Though, I never knew you would develop such interesting thighs. Shizune's eyes widened drastically, her entire face burning a furious shade of red. What? Naruto simply shrugged, an unapologetic smirk playing on his lips. What? If I don't check you out, who else am I supposed to look at? Well, yeah. But, just be appropriate, she stammered. Damn, you haven't changed a bit. He laughed warmly. Come on, it's just me. It's fine. Oink, oink. And what's with the pig? Naruto asked, glancing down at the small animal trotting happily along with them. What is his name, anyway? It is a she, Shizune corrected indignantly. Naruto blinked, squinting down at the pig walking beside their feet. Well, now that I think about it, there is nothing dangling down there. Naruto. Tsunade snored loudly, deeply asleep right in the middle of the Hokage's office. Wake up. The sudden, sharp command instantly snapped her eyes open. She gulped hard when she saw her little brother in all but blood standing before her, glaring absolute daggers. Scrambling to her feet immediately, she tried to force a confident smile to diffuse the suffocating tension. Why, you surely grew taller. I missed you. She gulped again as his icy glare only narrowed further. However, her eyes widened in profound relief when she spotted Shizune standing just behind him, offering a warm, reassuring smile. Oh, Shizune, thank God. I am not done with you. Naruto barked, sweeping past her to take his seat behind the massive desk. Back then, I used to fix your disasters because you are my sister. But now I am the Hokage, and I will not tolerate this nonsense anymore. Naruto. I'm sure Tsunade-sama has learned from her mistake, Shizune interjected softly, raising her hands with a gentle, sheepish smile. He cheated. Tsunade argued indignantly. And he demanded me as a bride. You just said I am your sister, would you really offer me up to that asshole? Then you come to me. Naruto roared back, his voice echoing off the walls. You don't just go around stealing his money and drinking it away. Goodness, Tsunade, you are even worse than sensei. Tsunade frowned, her brief flash of defiance completely crumbling. Lowering her gaze, she offered a short, respectful bow. I apologize, Lord Fifth. Naruto immediately cringed, his hardened expression visibly faltering. Just call me Naruto. I hate hearing that coming from you. Tsunade let out a quiet, shaky sigh of relief, immensely glad that he didn't actually hate her. And don't sigh in front of me. He snapped. All right. You will stay in this village. You will be the director of the hospital, and you will actually do your job. But I. Silence. You have had more than enough of a break. Naruto declared, his tone leaving absolutely no room for argument. Besides, I do not want Shizune far from me anymore. Tsunade raised both eyebrows in sheer surprise. Turning her head, she immediately caught the dark-haired woman blushing furiously, completely refusing to meet her gaze. Well, if it is an official order from the Hokage, I suppose I can't say anything, Tsunade conceded, a knowing, amused smirk pulling at her lips. Seeing that the matter was finally settled, Naruto let out a long, heavy sigh of profound relief. Standing up from his desk, he closed the distance between them and pulled Tsunade into a gentle, entirely unexpected hug. I am just glad you are safe, Naruto murmured, the last of his fiery anger finally bleeding away as Tsunade warmly returned the embrace. I knew you still had a soft spot for me, she teased softly. Breaking the hug, Naruto offered a small, genuine nod. There are some people you really need to meet. Yugao. Instantly, a purple-haired Anbu operative materialized in the room, dropping into a crisp, kneeling position. Sir. Bring Jiraiya-sensei and Narumi to my office. Yes, sir. Yugao acknowledged before vanishing in a silent blur. Jiraiya. He is here too. Tsunade asked, her eyes instantly lighting up at the thought of reuniting with her old teammate, and the sheer, glorious amount of sake they were inevitably going to drink together. I ordered him to stay in the village and train Narumi, Naruto explained calmly. Narumi-chan, how is she doing now? Shizune asked, absolutely beaming at the fond memory of the little blonde toddler. Naruto smiled wistfully, his gaze drifting up to rest on the proud portrait of his father hanging perfectly on the wall. She is exactly like him. You did what? Tsunade. Have you completely lost your mind? Jiraiya snapped at his former teammate, who actually had the decency to look absolutely sheepish. Jiraiya. He cheated. Why would you even gamble with him in the first place? He is a daimyo. More money, more fun, I guess, she mumbled defensively. Just drop it, sensei, Naruto sighed, aggressively rubbing his temples to fend off an impending headache. She is a walking disaster, exactly like her fighting style. Look who's talking about disasters. Tsunade yelled, jabbing an accusing finger at the Hokage, who simply rolled his eyes in response. Narumi just stood by the door, watching the chaotic scene unfold with a perfectly dumbfounded expression, genuinely wondering if this was actually real. Excuse me, what exactly is happening here? Tsunade blinked, shifting her gaze to the young blonde girl for the very first time. Her eyes immediately widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. Holy shit, did Minato seal the Kyuubi into her, or did he seal himself? Naruto barked out a loud laugh. Told you. I am Senju Tsunade, kid. One of the legendary Sannin. Tsunade boasted, instantly regaining her proud, confident swagger. Narumi's eyes lit up with sudden awe. Lady Tsunade, it is a profound honor. I have heard so much about you. You are incredibly well-mannered too. Just like the fourth, and completely unlike the fifth. Tsunade declared, shooting a distinctly smug look over at Naruto. Whatever, Naruto muttered flatly. Narumi chuckled softly before turning her attention to the dark-haired woman, who was smiling warmly at her while holding a pig, and you are. Before Shizune could even open her mouth to introduce herself, Tsunade happily cut in. Your brother's lover. What? Narumi shrieked, her usual calm demeanor completely shattering as her white eyes whipped toward her brother, who instantly choked violently on his own breath. Tsunade-sama. Not like this. Shizune wailed, her entire face igniting into a brilliant, mortified shade of crimson. That night. You have absolutely no idea how long I have wanted to do this, Naruto whispered, pulling her smoothly into another deep kiss. He leaned back into the heavy chair of his Hokage office, perfectly content with Shizune resting comfortably on his lap. Well, I am right here now. You can do whatever you want, Shizune whispered back against his lips, wrapping her arms securely around his neck as she eagerly deepened the kiss. Honestly, I am almost glad Tsunade gambled with that daimyo, Naruto murmured, breaking away just enough to rest his forehead against hers. Otherwise, I would have just stayed. Tired. Shizune echoed, pulling back slightly to look at him with a raised eyebrow. Yeah, I am 21 years old, Shizune, he pointed out, a slow, roguish smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Shizune blinked in confusion for a second before the realization suddenly dawned on her. Oh, that kind of tired, she gasped, letting out a cute, melodic giggle. Naruto groaned softly, his hands tightening securely on her waist. Damn it, if you keep giggling at me like that, we are going to end up doing this right in front of my predecessors, he warned, his gaze flicking briefly to the solemn portraits of the past Hokage hanging on the wall. That would definitely be inappropriate, Shizune hummed playfully. However, her smile softened a fraction, a brief hint of vulnerability bleeding into her voice. But, about being tired, did you really never think about anyone else? Naruto raised a single eyebrow, genuinely amused by the sudden flash of jealousy in her dark eyes. Did you? I am a woman. We love blindly, Shizune replied softly, gently tracing his jawline with her thumb. I don't know how it is for men. Never. I never dared to even think about it, Naruto whispered, his teasing tone melting away into raw, heavy emotion. His intense blue eyes locked entirely onto hers. Every single time my mind wandered. I just remembered how you were the only one there for me when my entire world shattered. Naruto. Shizune breathed, her eyes widening as a sudden, overwhelming urge to cry gripped her chest. My heart, he murmured, reaching up to gently brush a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. It has always been sealed by your presence. Shizune-san is wonderful, but why did you never tell me about her? Narumi asked from the doorway of the basement, quietly watching her brother polish an old, dusty study desk. The time never seemed right for it, Naruto replied simply, his hands moving in gentle, rhythmic circles over the worn wood. Why are you polishing that by hand? You could create a brand new one with a literal flick of your finger, Narumi pointed out in mild amusement. Naruto didn't even turn around. It was Tsun's desk. Oh. Naruto continued polishing in silence for another moment before his hand stilled. You want to ask me something else? Yes, Ni-san, why do you constantly compare me to father? Naruto blinked, finally looking over his shoulder with both eyebrows raised. Because you are his daughter. You should strive to be worthy of his legacy. It feels more like, you want me to replace him, just so you can fill the void he left in your heart. What? That is absolute nonsense. Jiraiya's sensei told me about the two of you. How you were the greatest duo in the elemental nations. And it was true. He was the legendary Yellow Flash. Fighting by his side was the greatest honor any Konoha shinobi could ever ask for. Naruto argued passionately. Ni-san. Narumi hesitated for a fraction of a second, but forced the words out anyway. You were stronger than him. Naruto's grip on the wooden polishing block tightened so violently that it instantly splintered and snapped in his hand. I was not. He snarled fiercely. He was a man who built himself up from absolutely nothing. An honorable prodigy who climbed the ranks through sheer brilliance. He didn't have the wood style. He didn't have the first Hokage knocking on his door to personally train him. He was an unrivaled genius who exceeded every single Uzumaki in Fuinjutsu. Naruto finished, his chest heaving with heavy, ragged pants. Narumi just frowned, a profound sadness in her eyes as she slowly pulled out a worn notebook bound in faded brown leather. Naruto's breath hitched, his eyes widening in shock. That is. Tsunade diary, Narumi murmured gently, carefully opening the fragile pages. I sit before the fire. Sleeping next to me is my son, my greatest comrade. A boy who is only 9 years old, yet someone I deeply, profoundly admire. It is such an unimaginable honor to be his father. Stop, Naruto whispered, his voice trembling. I know it is unbefitting of a Kage. But the moment I saw how the other Kage and their attendants were so utterly terrified of my son, I couldn't help but feel absolute, swelling pride. Narumi. After I heard he had spared the third Raikage's life, I was stunned. Stunned that my own son, at just 10 years old, had actually defeated that legendary shinobi. I will never tell him this to his face, because he will never accept it, but he is already far stronger than I am. I said stop. Naruto choked out. His towering frame finally gave out, collapsing heavily to his knees as hot tears freely streamed down his face. Ni-san. Narumi breathed in pure shock. Seeing her normally indomitable older brother looking so completely broken and vulnerable, she immediately dropped to her knees in front of him, tightly gripping his shaking shoulders. I know every single word written in there, Naruto wept, his tear-filled gaze meeting his sister's identical blue eyes. Every letter. I memorized it all in my heart. I don't want you to replace father. I am just so afraid, Narumi. I am terrified that people will only ever look at you and see my sister, instead of his daughter. I fear him being forgotten in my shadow. That is why I despised my own power. I just wished I had been weaker than him, Naruto confessed, his voice breaking entirely as his sister pulled him into a desperate, fiercely tight hug. I will honor Tsunade's name, Ni-san, Narumi vowed fiercely, burying her face into his shoulder. I promise. Chapter 9. Hokage Job. 2 years later, 23 years old Naruto. Throughout his years as Hokage, Naruto had come to the quiet realization that he loved this secluded room far more than his official office. He found infinitely more comfort sitting casually cross-legged on a floor cushion than being stiffly confined to that damn desk chair all day. Of course, to preserve his sanity, he always made sure to leave a shadow clone stationed at the main desk to handle the endless mountains of paperwork. Your reports are absolutely brilliant, Kurenai. Your superiors are constantly complimenting your work, Naruto praised the kneeling, red-eyed Kunoichi. He sat casually cross-legged on a plush cushion, meticulously trimming the delicate branches of a small bonsai tree. Keeping her expression perfectly stone-faced, Kurenai closed her eyes and offered a crisp, formal bow. I am doing my best, sir. I know you are, Naruto said softly. He set down his shears and pulled a sealed scroll from his robes, holding it out to her. I wrote this decree myself. Go and deliver it to Shikaku. Kurenai carefully accepted the scroll, her striking crimson eyes widening a fraction in surprise. Nara Shikaku, the Jonin commander. Yes, he will be the one giving you your flak jacket, Naruto added casually, his attention already shifting back to the precise care of his plant. Kurenai's strict professional facade finally broke, melting into a wide, genuinely thrilled smile. Thank you, Godime-sama. Knowing your nature, I imagine you will absolutely love being a Jonin instructor, Naruto noted smoothly. Nurturing the next generation is always a profound honor. She answered, her voice ringing with deep conviction. Naruto smiled warmly, thoroughly pleased by her immediate response. Wonderful. Spend this year gaining some hands-on experience as a Jonin, and next year, I will assign you your very own Genin team. Hi. This is the third time, Kakashi, Naruto stated flatly, his eyes locked onto the silver-haired Jonin kneeling lazily before him. Care to explain? They almost killed each other, Godime. They are absolutely not ready, Kakashi replied, his visible eye deadpan and his tone laced with absolute finality. I mean, look, even Guy is getting his own Genin team. Naruto exclaimed, throwing his hands up in sheer exasperation. Maybe you should learn a thing or two from him. Kakashi slumped his shoulders, letting out a long, muffled sigh of pure, unfiltered despair into his mask. Was his track record really that miserable? Was the Hokage actually ordering him to take teaching advice from Guy, of all people? I will try my best, Kakashi simply said. Naruto let out a long, heavy sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. You are my dearest friend. You are a brilliant shinobi, and you are extremely intelligent. Because of that, I will respect your judgment on this. But, Kakashi, I swear, if I find out you are failing them on purpose, I will. Kakashi gulped audibly as his Hokage left the dark threat hanging, slowly and menacingly clenching his fist. Tisk. Damn it. Naruto cursed under his breath as his shears snipped the completely wrong branch off his bonsai tree. Letting out a heavy sigh, he casually channeled a fraction of his chakra, seamlessly regrowing the severed wood in an instant. I used to be way better at this back in the day. Turning around, he suddenly realized Guy's Genin team was standing quietly before him. All three of the young shinobi were giving him utterly incredulous looks, while Guy simply stood there beaming as proudly as usual. This is the legendary boy wonder, Neji thought, a heavy wave of sheer, unfiltered disbelief washing over him as he stared at the casually seated redhead playing with a plant. Whoa, Guy's team, how are you doing, Genin? Naruto greeted brightly, his casual, entirely relaxed demeanor completely at odds with his terrifying reputation. Sir, the three newly minted shinobi replied in perfect, crisp unison. Naruto smiled gently at the young squad. While Guy grinned as vibrantly as ever beside them, what truly captured the Hokage's attention was Hizashi's boy, Neji, the rookie of the year, and widely rumored to be the greatest prodigy the Hyuga clan had produced in generations. Life is certainly full of surprises. To think Guy actually has a team of his own now, Naruto chuckled warmly. Leaning forward, his expression shifted into one of genuine, earnest respect as he addressed the three genin directly. You guys got an absolutely brilliant shinobi as your sensei. You should be extremely proud of that. The sudden, heartfelt praise from the Hokage instantly forced thick, comical waterfalls of tears to cascade down Guy's face. Godime, I shall never let you down. I swear it, Guy bellowed passionately, punching a triumphant fist high into the air. Naruto chuckled softly before his sharp blue eyes locked onto the Hyuga. You are Neji, the son of Hizashi, right? Neji's pale eyes widened slightly at the sudden, unexpected mention of his late father. He instantly stiffened, straightening his posture to absolute military perfection. Why yes, Hokage-sama. Naruto gave a firm, deeply approving nod. Your father was a truly magnificent shinobi. We fought side by side on the battlefields during the war. Work hard, Neji, and make him proud. Completely disarmed by the legendary Hokage's genuine warmth and profound respect, Neji could only manage a dumb, awestruck nod. Thank you, sir. Very well then, Naruto smiled, his demeanor shifting smoothly back to business as he reached for a scroll. Your mission today will be. I heard you promoted Kurenai to Jonin, Shizune said softly. She sat comfortably beside her lover atop his own carved stone face on the Hokage monument, the two of them quietly watching the vibrant hues of the sunset paint the sprawling village below. That I did. She is a good kunoichi, Naruto replied simply, shifting slightly to wrap a warm, protective arm around Shizune's shoulders. Melting into the affectionate gesture, Shizune rested her head contentedly against his chest. Well, she is a dear friend of mine, so thank you for doing that. Enough about Kurenai. Come here, Naruto murmured, his voice dropping to a gentle, husky timbre. Cupping her cheek gently, he pulled her into a slow, incredibly warm kiss. I definitely prefer this over talking about Kurenai, Shizune hummed against his lips. A soft smile graced her features as she wrapped her arms securely around his neck, eagerly deepening the kiss as the last rays of the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Almost 20 of Konoha's elite jonin had crammed into the lively local tavern, their voices rising in unison to celebrate Kurenai's recent promotion. To Kurenai, they cheered loudly, the crisp clinking of their sake cups ringing through the air. Guys, this really wasn't necessary, Kurenai protested softly. A sheepish smile tugged at her lips, a rare, faint blush dusting her pale cheeks. Nonsense, Enko declared boisterously, slinging a heavy, affectionate arm around the newly minted Jonin's shoulders. You absolutely deserve this. I just hope the Godime doesn't catch wind of this. He despises alcohol, and here we are in the middle of the afternoon, Ibiki muttered. An entirely unusual wave of nervousness flickered across the scarred interrogator's face as he quickly gulped down his sake. Tisk, Ibiki, since when did you become such a coward? Enko laughed, waving her cup dismissively. The goddamn being a total bore isn't going to stop us from celebrating. She threw her head back in a loud laugh, but blinked in sudden confusion when absolutely no one joined her. Instead, the lively atmosphere vanished in an instant. Every single jonin at the table had frozen stiff, staring at the space right behind her with expressions of sheer, unadulterated terror. Huh, what's wrong with you guys? She asked, her grin faltering. So, I am boring. Enko gulped audibly as a heavy, suffocating shadow suddenly loomed over her. Sweating profusely, she turned her head with agonizing slowness, only to find the very man she had just insulted staring down at her, his piercing blue eyes narrowed dangerously. Gee goddime, what a coincidence, we were just talking about you. Enko stammered, offering a strained, terrified grin. I heard, Naruto replied flatly, his intense glare entirely unmoving. The oppressive, suffocating silence stretched for another agonizing second before his hardened expression suddenly melted into a bright, easy smile. Pour me a cup, I want to celebrate too. Whoa, now that is my Hokage. Enko cheered, her boundless energy instantly returning as she eagerly poured him a brimming cup of sake. Naruto grabbed the ceramic cup and took a confident gulp. Almost instantly, his eyes bugged out, and his face turned a sickening shade of green. He violently spat the liquid right back out, coughing and sputtering wildly. This is disgusting. Bring me tea, he roared indignantly. Why yes, sir. The entire table of elite shinobi shouted back in absolute panic. It was a formal jonin meeting. Konoha's elite shinobi sat respectfully cross-legged across the spacious room, all giving their undivided attention to their Hokage, who was seated comfortably on his plush floor cushion. The Wind Daimyo has been redirecting the vast majority of his country's missions to us, Naruto stated, his expression twisting into a sharp scowl of pure disgust at the mere thought of Tsunade. I can't exactly blame him. That shithole of a village could never produce consistently good shinobi anyway. Even their allegedly greatest Kekkei, the Sannin, managed to get himself kidnapped or something. Kidnapped, Kurenai murmured, her striking red eyes widening in genuine surprise. Yeah, he just suddenly vanished without a trace years ago, Naruto replied casually, waving a dismissive hand. He used to manipulate some kind of weird black sand. What was it called again? Iron sand, goddime, Kakashi supplied smoothly from his spot in the crowd. Ah, yes, that's the one, Naruto nodded, leaning back slightly. And now, their strongest remaining shinobi is just that decrepit old hag, Chiyo. She is retired now. I imagine we didn't gather here just so you could hate on Tsunade, Hokage-sama, Aoba pointed out dryly, a massive, comical sweat drop practically visible on his forehead. Naruto chuckled sheepishly, reaching up to rub the back of his neck in a rare, completely unabashed display of embarrassment. Yeah, sorry about that. I honestly don't know why you refused the seat so many times. This job is actually really nice. Naruto remarked, taking a calm sip of his hot tea while sitting across from his former sensei, who was already deep into a bottle of sake. Naruto eyed the small ceramic cup in the older man's hand with mild disgust. I tried that stuff last week. How do you even stomach it? It is completely disgusting. You get used to it. Jiraiya laughed cheerfully, happily pouring himself another brimming cup. His smile slowly faded, however, his tone growing a bit more reflective. But about the job, I don't know. When I compare myself to the men who have held the title of Hokage, I always felt like I never truly earned the right. What utter nonsense. Naruto scoffed immediately, setting his teacup down with a sharp clink. You are Jiraiya. You are one of the greatest shinobi this village has ever produced. You are literally a living legend. Jiraiya smiled warmly at the fierce, unhesitating compliment, though a hint of self-deprecation lingered in his dark eyes. Even legends have tears, Naruto. Uchiha Madara. Senju Hashirama. You. In my travels, I have actually met people who still firmly believe you are nothing more than a terrifying myth. Can you even imagine that? I can't exactly blame them, Naruto murmured, his gaze dropping back to the surface of his tea. Back then, I was nothing but a walking hurricane of destruction. God's punishment. That is exactly what the third Mizukage used to call you, Jiraiya recalled quietly, shaking his head. Yeah, I know, Naruto replied, a faint, almost humorless smile touching his lips. You have become so soft now, though, Jiraiya noted, his eyes warming with genuine, paternal affection. I am just incredibly glad you were able to hold on to your sanity and humanity, especially given that you possessed the raw power to single-handedly conquer a continent by the time you were 10 years old. Naruto fell silent for a moment, his gaze drifting thoughtfully to the steam rising from his cup. About Madara, he murmured softly, redirecting the conversation. Sensei used to love him a lot, despite everything that happened between them. And I can't lie, before he became whatever he ultimately became, he was an exceptional shinobi. People from his era described him as deeply honorable. Can you even imagine that? I certainly don't know as much about the man as you do, Jiraiya muttered, leaning in slightly, his natural curiosity thoroughly piqued. Naruto leaned forward across the low table, his voice dropping into a quiet, conspiratorial whisper. He was actually the one who came up with the name Konoha. Jiraiya's jaw practically dropped, his eyes widening to the size of dinner plates in absolute shock. No shit. Yup, Naruto replied, popping the P with a deeply amused, knowing smirk. Alright, class, this is the Hokage monument right here, Iruka announced, gesturing proudly out over the cliff face as his students gathered atop the Hokage tower. This is where the faces of our 5 great Hokage are carved. There are only 5, who will become the 6th? Kiba asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his usual brashness. Iruka smirked playfully, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Who knows? Maybe I will. A deep, warm laugh suddenly rumbled from directly behind Iruka, instantly capturing the entire class's attention. What an ambitious thing to teach your students, Iruka. Iruka stiffened, turning around with a nervous, deeply embarrassed chuckle. Gee goddime, how nice of you to join us. Ni-san. Naruto blinked in surprise at the familiar voice. Scanning the small crowd of academy students, he quickly spotted his little sister staring back at him with wide eyes. Whoa, this is Narumi's class. How are you doing, kids? Hey, Narumi's brother, I heard you were just a myth. Kiba blurted out, pointing an accusing finger at the village leader. Kiba, you disrespectful brat, Iruka yelled, his head comically enlarging in sheer frustration. Naruto simply threw his head back and laughed loudly. It's fine, Iruka, we can't expect kids to blindly believe everything they hear. Iruka aggressively cleared his throat, adjusting his posture to demand absolute respect. Listen closely, class, this is the Godime Hokage. The legendary boy wonder, and arguably the greatest shinobi in the entire history of the elemental nations. A collective, awestruck gasp echoed through the academy students. Naruto blushed faintly, rubbing the back of his neck in mild embarrassment. Now, Iruka, don't overdo it. Impossible. The greatest in history. One of the students whispered loudly. He looks so gentle. Yeah, I heard he just spends all his time growing cacti. Another chimed in. Naruto's gentle smile instantly vanished, replaced by a defensive, deeply serious frown. Do not underestimate the sheer difficulty of raising a cactus. It requires meticulous maintenance and incredibly precise care. Every single student's sweat dropped in perfect unison. Yup, no way this guy is a legend, they collectively thought. Narumi simply chuckled at her elder brother's antics. Are you really the strongest? The unexpected question immediately silenced the chatter. The usually brooding Uchiha Sasuke, who almost never spoke a word during field trips, stared intensely at the Hokage. It was no wonder all the other students turned to look at him with wide, shocked eyes. Naruto fell silent. He thought for a long moment, his intense blue gaze drifting out over the sprawling village and up to the towering Hokage monument, lingering specifically on the weathered, stoic stone face of the first Hokage. A slow, knowing smile finally curved his lips. Well, Naruto answered softly, his voice suddenly carrying an unspoken, heavy weight that sent a shiver down the students' spines. The only people who could ever keep up with me died decades ago. Chapter 10. Memories and Regrets. Flashback, 12 years old Naruto. The Aikibi, that pathetic village actually lost its Biju. Naruto exclaimed, his voice dripping with an equal mix of bewilderment and sheer amusement. How can you even lose something like that? It is literally the size of a mountain. Minato sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. He couldn't lie, Tsunade had been getting on his nerves lately, too. Their Jinchuriki tried to tap into its power, but he lost control. And, well, it escaped. So, you are telling me to go all the way out there, into that disgusting, blazing desert, just to search for the Aikibi. Naruto deadpanned, crossing his arms defensively. And restrain it, if you can. Minato added, offering his son a sheepish, apologetic smile. I absolutely will not help that village. I should have turned that entire sandbox into a jungle 2 years ago. Naruto argued fiercely. You are not turning anything into a jungle, and you will go out there and find the Biju. Minato ordered. His tone suddenly shifted, leaving no room for argument as it filled with absolute, commanding authority. Naruto scowled, glaring heatedly at the blond man behind the desk. You are just using your dual authority as both my father and the Hokage. Well, that is exactly what being a father and the Hokage is for, Minato countered with a light, victorious chuckle. How could anyone be foolish enough to build an entire village in this cursed wasteland? Naruto muttered bitterly to himself. He stood waiting at the designated rendezvous point, the blazing desert sun beating down on him relentlessly. After a few more moments of agonizing heat, an elderly woman flanked by two Suna shinobi finally materialized from the shimmering dunes. Naruto blinked, staring openly at the wrinkled woman. Who are you, Granny? Did you escape from a nursing home or something? Why, you insolent brat? This is the Honorable Chiyo-sama. One of the Suna Jonin yelled. However, the intended threat fell completely flat, his voice trembling with thinly veiled terror. Chiyo narrowed her sharp, calculating eyes. You must be the boy wonder. I have heard quite a lot about you. Of course you have. I almost wiped this entire shithole off the map, Naruto replied, a deeply amused, arrogant smirk curving his lips. How is Rasa doing, by the way? I actually thought he would come out to greet me himself. Chiyo's glare darkened further. She absolutely loathed this arrogant Konoha brat, and it burned her to the core knowing she was completely powerless to do anything about his blatant disrespect. Lord Fourth is currently busy. Let us just get on with our mission. Do you actually have any idea what you're doing, Granny? We have been wandering aimlessly out here for 2 hours, Naruto complained, his annoyance with this entire mission officially reaching a boiling point. Chiyo simply nodded, slowly opening her aged eyes. It is right there. Naruto's irritation vanished instantly. He certainly wasn't disappointed when he finally laid eyes on the colossal, sand-colored beast casually lumbering across the desert dunes in the distance. Hey, wait up! Naruto suddenly yelled at the towering monster. Without a second thought, he launched himself off the cliff directly toward it, completely ignoring the horrified, collective gasp of the accompanying Suna shinobi. Why, you reckless brat, what do you think you are doing? Chiyo screamed in sheer, unadulterated panic. Aikibi! Naruto roared across the wind-swept sands. The massive beast instantly froze in its tracks, slowly turning its terrifying, towering visage to peer down at the tiny human who dared to call its name. Who the hell are you, kid? And is that a Konoha headband? Shukaku's booming voice shook the very air. Shut up and let yourself get caught quietly. Naruto yelled back, eyeing the towering-tailed beast in pure annoyance. He blinked in genuine surprise, however, when the colossal monster suddenly threw its head back and started laughing. Gwahahaha. You are a funny brat. You really think you can catch me? The great Shukaku-sama. I'll kill you. A bit funky, aren't you? Naruto muttered, sweat dropping slightly. But his casual demeanor vanished the instant he saw the massive beast violently smack its own swollen belly. Wind style, drilling air bullet. Shit, Naruto thought. His hands blurred into the snake seal. Instantly, thick pillars of timber erupted from the sand, bending and interlocking to create a massive, reinforced wooden dome just in time to block the devastating, spiraling sphere of highly compressed air. Wood. Shukaku bellowed in shock, the beast completely unfamiliar with the legendary element. Before it could even process the sight, the sands violently parted, and a colossal wooden dragon erupted from the earth. The serpentine construct lunged, viciously coiling its massive, biting body entirely around the tailed beast. Shukaku roared furiously, trying to summon the surrounding desert to its aid, only to freeze in sudden, absolute terror. The beast realized, with a jolt of panic, that its chakra was being rapidly and forcefully drained away. It couldn't mold a single jutsu. Time to end this, Naruto declared, stepping smoothly out from behind his protective dome. His hands flashed through a complex sequence of seals in a blur. Instantly, massive wooden pillars spiked out of the desert floor, snapping securely around Shukaku's limbs and neck, restraining the beast completely. Why, you brat, what are you doing? Shukaku shrieked in uncharacteristic, genuine horror. It couldn't be caught. Not again. Naruto vanished in a flicker of speed, instantly reappearing directly in front of the beast's massive stomach. Raising his palm, a glowing kanji materialized on his skin, and he slammed his hand firmly against the beast's sandy flesh. 10th Edict of Enlightenment. Shukaku thrashed wildly, desperately trying to resist the overwhelming suppression jutsu, but it was completely futile. The beast's crazed yellow eyes rolled back into its head, and with an earth-shattering boom, the massive one tail collapsed heavily onto the desert dunes, falling fast asleep. Well, that was surprisingly easy, Naruto muttered to himself, brushing some sand off his clothes. But then again, this is just the Aikibi. The Kyuubi must be on an entirely different level. Turning around, he found Chiyo and her subordinates standing frozen on the distant cliff edge, their jaws practically hitting the sand as they gaped at him in pure, unfiltered shock. Naruto casually waved a dismissive hand at them. Yeah, I'm done here. You guys can take it from here. He captured Shukaku. And he didn't even break a sweat, Chiyo breathed, her voice trembling slightly. A cold, sickening knot tightened in her stomach at the mere thought of that terrifying child. Yondaime, perhaps we should reconsider. We cannot afford to ever anger Konoha again. Ross's face contorted into a dark, heavy scowl, a volatile mixture of sheer panic and bitter frustration bleeding into his usually stoic features. What are you saying, Chiyo? That we should just resign ourselves to licking Konoha's boots? He snarled, his hands clenching into white-knuckled fists. The weapon must be established. Otherwise, this entire village is doomed. Rasa, open your eyes. Chiyo snapped back, her usual composure completely shattering. Such a weapon will never be enough against a monster like that. Then what do you propose we do? Rasa roared, his desperate voice echoing harshly off the desolate desert winds. Chiyo slowly lowered her gaze to the sand, the suffocating weight of their grim reality suddenly settling heavily across her aged shoulders. I don't know. Ebizo, you really should have seen him. Chiyo murmured, settling heavily onto the floor cushion across from her younger brother. Ebizo slowly lowered his teacup, his aged, calculating eyes suddenly gleaming with intense curiosity. Was he truly just as the rumors say? During the war, I genuinely thought Konoha was just exaggerating his prowess to intimidate us, Chiyo admitted, her voice uncharacteristically frail. But then there was the incident 2 years ago. And then what I witnessed with my own eyes yesterday. She trailed off, her weathered hands trembling just a fraction as she stared down into her cup. I cannot believe such a terrifying human actually exists, she whispered, her troubled gaze locked onto the faint, unsettling ripples dancing across the surface of her tea. Flashback end back to present, 24 years old Naruto, 12 years old Narumi. I've been thinking, maybe I should pay a visit to Tsunade, Naruto said casually to the previous Hokage, who promptly choked and nearly spat his hot tea across the table. What? Hiruzen coughed, his aged eyes wide with absolute shock. But you absolutely despise that village. Naruto frowned deeply, his melancholic gaze locked onto the faint ripples dancing in his teacup. I really have no genuine reason to harbor so much hatred toward them. Just because a village is weak is no reason to despise its people. That is incredibly surprising coming from you, Naruto, Hiruzen murmured, raising a curious, bushy eyebrow at his successor. Do you remember when I captured the Aikibi? Naruto asked softly. Vividly, of course, the elder statesman replied. I was on that mission with Chiyo, the puppeteer. I am well aware of who Chiyo is, Naruto, Hiruzen interrupted dryly, a massive, comical sweat drop practically materializing on his wrinkled forehead. Anyway, Naruto sighed heavily, running a tired hand through his red hair. I remember treating her like she was nothing but a complete nuisance. A legendary kunoichi of her caliber deserved far more respect than that. Why was I like that, Hiruzen-sama? Look at my father, my mother, and even Narumi. They are all so humble. Hiruzen's expression softened into one of profound, ancient understanding. He set his teacup down gently. Well, you were always unique, Naruto. Naruto closed his eyes, the dark weight of his own monstrous legend pressing heavily against his conscience. I was arrogant prick. That kid from Narumi's class is certainly intelligent. Cacti are incredibly fun to grow. Naruto declared happily, carefully pouring a measured trickle of water onto his prized plant. It was actually growing. Shizune leaned against the doorframe, watching the peaceful scene with deep amusement. It is fascinating how your preferences have changed over the years. Naruto paused, glancing over his shoulder. What do you mean? You have grown much softer, Naruto. Now you find genuine happiness in watering cacti, Shizune noted gently, slowly approaching the redhead, who was currently dressed in a set of messy gardening clothes. Really? Naruto whispered softly. He set down his small watering can and quietly examined his calloused hands. I used to be pretty scary back in the day, huh? Shizune frowned slightly, catching the faint hint of shame lingering in his voice. She reached out, gently resting her hand over his. Not to me. I always thought you were cool. I suppose my younger self just fell in love with that quiet, incredibly powerful boy. I see, Naruto murmured softly, a faint, thoughtful smile touching his lips. Kakashi, Asuma, and Kurenai stood awkwardly, massive sweat drops practically visible on their foreheads as they looked around their Hokage's personal greenhouse. It was undeniably a magnificent, lush sanctuary, but why on earth had they been formally summoned here of all places? I am assigning you your Genin teams today, Naruto declared cheerfully, completely unfazed by their confusion as he carefully watered a row of vibrant exotic plants. Here, Asuma asked, blinking through the thick smoke of his cigarette in utter bewilderment. Naruto paused, glancing over his shoulder with an inquisitive eyebrow raised. Yeah, why not? It is a very nice place. I have to admit, it really is, Kakashi mumbled lazily, his lone visible eye scanning the incredibly well-maintained foliage. It is just amazing how silly and gentle you have become, Naruto, Kurenai noted softly, watching the supposedly fearsome redhead meticulously tend to a delicate flower with genuine awe. Naruto's cheerful expression faltered into a slight, contemplative frown. Shizune recently said the exact same thing. Listen, you three aren't just my subordinates. You are my friends, too. Well, you are right about that, Asuma agreed, his posture relaxing slightly. Naruto set down his watering can, his back still turned to the group. What was I really like? Back in the day, did I ever scare you? The three elite Jonin instantly stiffened, their eyes widening in sheer surprise at the deeply vulnerable question. Kakashi was the first to finally break the heavy silence. Of course not, Kakashi stated firmly, his tone completely devoid of its usual lazy drawl. We looked up to you. Just like the rest of the entire village did. Beside him, both Asuma and Kurenai offered immediate, fiercely supportive nods of absolute agreement. I see. Thank you for the answer. Now for the teams. Tsunade was incredibly relieved to finally finish her exhausting shift at the hospital. She had been eagerly looking forward to grabbing a few drinks and unwinding for the evening, but her plans were abruptly halted when an Anbu operative suddenly materialized before her. The Godime was summoning her directly to the top of the Hokage monument. Perplexed by the sudden and highly informal request, she complied anyway. Arriving atop Naruto's carved stone face, she found the young Hokage sitting quietly cross-legged, gazing out at the vibrant, fading hues of the sunset. You summoned me, Naruto? She asked, stepping up behind him. Yes, Tsunade, Naruto replied, his voice carrying a heavy, deeply vulnerable weight she had never heard from him before. I wanted to ask you something. Sure, she answered cautiously, her brow furrowing in genuine concern. Naruto fell silent for a long moment before finally speaking. Do you think Ka-san ever feared me? What? Tsunade yelled, her hazel eyes widening in absolute shock. Kushina, of course not. She was incredibly proud of you, always and forever. She used to boast to anyone who would listen that you were the greatest Uzumaki in the entire history of the clan. Naruto didn't look back at her. I was so arrogant back then, Tsunade. I was harsh, ruthless, and I used to say things that were just unhinged. Like threatening to turn the entirety of Sunagakure into a massive jungle and forcing their elite shinobi to act as gardeners. Tsunade recalled, a faint, surprisingly nostalgic smile touching her lips. Yes, Naruto admitted, his head bowing shamefully as he stared down at his lap. That day, I caught her staring at me. She just looked so worried. You were definitely overthinking it, Naruto, Tsunade said softly, her heart aching slightly for the usually unshakable leader. I am afraid, Tsunade, Naruto confessed, his voice cracking with a raw, broken vulnerability. I am terrified that my mother died fearing what I was becoming. Or that she had even a single ounce of fear toward me in her heart. Her last words to me were that she was proud of me. But was that just to comfort me? Is that enough? He finally looked up, his bright blue eyes reflecting the last, fading light of the sun. I stopped finding any joy in battle a long time ago. That is the real reason I stopped taking on missions. But I could never bring myself to admit that out loud. I never knew that, Tsunade admitted, shocked by what she just heard. I just want to become a better person, Naruto continued, his voice dropping to a fragile, aching whisper. I want to be gentler. I am so terrified of looking at someone, only to find them staring back at me with nothing but fear in their eyes. He let out a trembling breath, the weight of a legendary, bloody reputation suddenly looking far too heavy for his shoulders. I don't want to be, Boy Wonder, anymore. Chapter 11, Filler, in Another Universe. The Great Son and Father. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Hiruzen roared, his single-thrown shuriken instantly multiplying into a deadly, raining swarm of hundreds. Summoning Jutsu, Edo Tensai. Hiruzen's eyes widened in horror as two massive wooden coffins suddenly erupted from the tiled roof, easily blocking the onslaught of blades. But his shock intensified into pure, paralyzing dread the moment he recognized the overwhelming chakra signatures radiating from within them. Oh no, out of all the people he could have summoned, these two. So, what are you going to do now, Sarutobi-sensei? Or should I say, Sandaime Hokage-sama? Orochimaru mocked, his voice dripping with venomous malice. The heavy wooden lids slammed open and fell away, revealing two figures stepping out into the sunlight, a blonde-haired man wearing a sweeping white haori, and a striking redhead clad in standard Jonin attire. It can't be. Those are. One of the observing Anbu operatives exclaimed from outside the barrier, his voice trembling violently behind his porcelain mask. Yondaime-sama. And Naruto-sama. Another Anbu gasped, completely paralyzed by the impossible sight. The two men who single-handedly ended the Third Great Ninja War. The Fourth Hokage and the Boy Wonder. Sandaime-sama. Is that you? Minato asked softly, his ethereal, cracking face blinking against the light. Whoa, is that really you? You became a wrinkly old geezer, Sandaime, Naruto remarked, a phantom smirk playing on his lips despite the grim situation. To think I would have to face the legendary father and son duo in such a twisted, sickening manner. How truly unfortunate, Hiruzen muttered, a cold bead of sweat rolling down his aged cheek as he gripped his bow staff tightly. Prepare yourselves. Minato. Naruto. Edo Tensei. What a vile. It perfectly suits a disgusting snake like him, Naruto spat, shifting his piercing gaze to glare daggers at Orochimaru. Looks like we don't have a choice but to fight you, Sandaime-sama. Minato said as he eyed the old Hokage with sadness. Now, that is quite enough catching up. Let's begin. Orochimaru hissed in twisted delight, slamming his hands together. No matter what era it is. It seems there is always conflict, Minato murmured. His voice carried a heavy, sorrowful weight, the chilling, hollow resonance of the dead. As Orochimaru tightened his dark grip on the jutsu, the light of consciousness faded from Minato's eyes, leaving behind the cold, vacant stare of a mindless puppet. Naruto, however, began to violently tremble, his cracking, paper-like Edo Tensei form shaking with pure, unadulterated fury. You imbecile scumbag. You actually think you can control me? Naruto roared. With a terrifying, monstrous exertion of sheer willpower, the psychic hold of the Edo Tensei completely shattered around him. Moving in a blur of blinding speed, he viciously kicked Orochimaru across the roof. But before he could pursue the Sannin, his eyes widened in shock. His own father suddenly materialized directly in front of him, a violently swirling Rasengan thrust mercilessly toward his chest. Narrowly dodging the lethal sphere, Naruto was forced to fiercely kick his mind-controlled father away as well, sending Minato skidding across the cracked tiles. Naruto. Hiruzen stammered, his jaw dropping in utter disbelief. You actually broke free. Orochimaru scrambled to his feet, his serpentine eyes blown wide with genuine, paralyzing horror. How did you break out of my absolute control? Because I am me, Naruto stated simply, his voice dropping to a deadly, echoing cadence. He slowly raised his hands, his fingers locking tightly into the snake seal. It has been a long time. His expression suddenly twisted into a wild, borderline psychotic grin, his legendary, terrifying persona as the Boy Wonder, roaring back to life. You have no idea how much I have dreamed of this day, Orochimaru. Shit. Orochimaru cursed mentally, his cold blood turning entirely to ice. Wood style, deep forest emergence. Sorry, Tsunade. But you're out of here, Naruto muttered, placing his hand gently on his father's forehead. Minato was currently bound tight by thick, unyielding wooden branches. Sadly, it seems Orochimaru managed to escape. Don't forget to check on Narumi before you come back to us. Minato said with a warm, gentle smile, just before his glowing soul was finally released from its earthly vessel, crumbling into dust and ash. Sandaime-sama. Thank goodness you are safe. One of the Anbu operatives gasped in relief, leaping down to the shattered roof. He instantly froze, however, when a pair of piercing blue eyes locked onto him. Naruto-sama. You cannot imagine the absolute honor. At ease, kid, Naruto replied casually, waving off the reverence. Turning to the Sandaime, who was leaning heavily on his staff in sheer exhaustion, he raised an eyebrow. Seriously, old man, what are you doing still wearing that hat at your age? Why didn't you pass it on? To whom? Hiruzen asked, his expression entirely deadpan. Right. It was supposed to be me, Naruto muttered, a brief, bitter flash of sadness crossing his cracked, paper-like features. He quickly shook his head, his eyes narrowing sharply. Who is attacking the village? Tsunade and Otogakure, Hiruzen answered grimly. Odo what? The fuck is that? Wait. Naruto paused, his eyes widening dangerously as the second name registered. Did you just say Suna? Hiruzen gulped audibly. He knew exactly what kind of terrifying storm was brewing behind that question. Yes, they have infiltrated the village. What? Those treacherous scumbags. I absolutely knew it. I should have turned their entire wasteland into a jungle and forced them to be my gardeners years ago. With a deafening boom, Naruto leapt away, leaving behind nothing but a cratered roof and a massive cloud of dust. Finally, I can actually kill those bastards. Alliance, my ass, he thought gleefully as he soared through the air. He is a bit unhinged, isn't he? The Anbu operative mumbled in shock, staring blankly at the empty space where the legendary hero had just stood. Hiruzen let out a tired, breathless chuckle. He has always been exactly like that. God only knows what kind of Hokage he would have become if he'd had the chance to grow up. Down in the streets below, absolute chaos reigned. This is our chance. Kill them all. Asuna commander roared. Nearly 200 Tsunade shinobi had infiltrated the sector, completely ready to burn Konoha to the ground. They all froze in unison, however, when a figure suddenly crashed into the earth directly in front of them, shattering the stone pavement like fragile glass. What the? Is that? Red hair. Oh, no, it can't be. Tsunade. Naruto declared, slowly rising from the crater with a terrifying, unnervingly wide grin plastered across his cracked face. You guys have absolutely no idea how much I used to dream about this very moment. Finally, I can kill sand ninjas without getting lectured. It's the boy wonder. One of the invaders shrieked in absolute terror, dropping his weapon. What is he doing here? He died years ago. Another screamed, scrambling backward frantically. It was far too late for retreat. The earth beneath their feet was already beginning to rumble violently, massive roots tearing through the pavement. I am going to make sure I bury every single one of you. Naruto roared, his hands blurring perfectly into the snake seal. You fucking uncultured scumbags. Naruto smiled widely, letting out a heavy, incredibly satisfied sigh of relief. Just 1 minute ago, he had been standing before 200 elite sand shinobi. Now, 200 mangled corpses littered the shattered streets. If I only had more time, I would have traveled straight to Tsunade to finish the job. Damn, he muttered in genuine annoyance. He blinked, however, pausing as a sudden, violently familiar wave of malicious chakra washed over him from a distance. The Aikibi, that funky tanuki is here, too. Oh, this was just getting better and better. Nearby in the forest, Narumi gulped hard as the deranged, sand-covered bastard barreled straight toward her. She was just about to grab Sakura and Sasuke and jump away, but suddenly, a blinding blur of red intercepted the attack, viciously kicking the Sannin across the clearing. Her bright blue eyes widened as the dust settled, finally getting a good look at her savior. He looked exactly like the legends, exactly how Jiraiya-sensei had described him. Why you are Naruto, she breathed out. Naruto spun around, his cracked, paper-like face instantly lighting up with a beaming, overjoyed smile. My goodness, Narumi, is that really you? Why yes, she yelped as he vanished and reappeared directly in front of her, pulling her into a fiercely tight hug. Just look at you, you're so grown up. I heard it's been 12 years since I died. We're exactly the same age now. Yes, Ni-san, Narumi sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. Why you are, the boy wonder, Sakura mumbled in absolute shock, pointing a violently shaking finger at the legendary redhead. Naruto released his sister and puffed out his chest proudly. Of course I am. Though, please, call me the Slayer of Tsunade. I literally just earned the title a few minutes ago. You're actually real, Sasuke murmured, his Sharingan spinning in sheer disbelief. Naruto's eye twitched in profound annoyance. You Uchihas have always been jealous of me. Of course you'd run around telling people I was fake. Finally, someone else to kill, Gaara roared, violently interrupting the reunion. Naruto blinked, turning his attention to the half-transformed redhead covered in shifting sand. His eyes narrowed sharply as he took in the boy's features. Asuna ninja threatening a Konoha ninja. You useless motherfucker. Who are you? Gaara shrieked, clutching his head erratically. Why did mother suddenly go completely silent the second you appeared? You're the Jinchuriki. And you look exactly like Rasa, which means you must be his kid, Naruto deduced. A terrifyingly dark, eager grin slowly spread across his cracked face. Oh, this is just getting better and better. First, I get to slaughter Tsunade's invasion force, and now I get to beat Rasa's son to a pulp. Where is Rasa hiding, anyway? Moments later, Naruto casually stood before his sister, dusting off his hands. Behind him, all three of the formidable Tsunade siblings were completely unconscious, heavily bound and suspended in the air by massive, unyielding wooden branches. Tisk. Just like their father, fucking losers. Look at you, you look so much like Tsunade. Naruto said warmly, gripping his sister's shoulders with deep affection. And you are so tall, Ni-san. Are you absolutely sure you were only 12? Narumi asked, wiping her tears with a watery laugh. Naruto laughed brightly. I have always been tall. Slowly, however, his cheerful grin faltered into a soft, wistful smile. His Edo Tensei body began to glow with a blinding, ethereal light, his paper-like skin starting to flake away into the wind. "Ni-san, what is happening?" Narumi cried out in panic, reaching for him. "It looks like my borrowed time is finally over," Naruto replied softly, stepping back as his soul began to release from the jutsu's hold. "Narumi, make us proud. And if you see that disgusting snake, be sure to thank him on my behalf for letting me see you." His body began to crumble entirely into ash, his final, echoing words ringing out through the forest as his soul ascended. Oh, and never trust a Suna ninja. Chapter 11. The New Era. Naruto never minded the elderly advisors. They were old, stern, and undeniably annoying, but their intentions were pure. Unlike Danzo's. Now, the three of them sat together in the Hokage's office, meticulously discussing the newly formed Genin teams. These teams are well constructed. Having Kakashi keep an eye on both Sasuke and Narumi is a wise decision, Koharu noted, her aged eyes scanning the official assignment documents. Homura nodded in solemn agreement. The Sharingan is the only thing capable of suppressing the Kyuubi's chakra if Minato's seal ever begins to fail. Naruto frowned slightly, leaning forward and resting his chin on his hands. There is a reason why my father used the 8 trigram seal and deliberately left us the key. He envisioned something further down the road. Both Koharu and Homura blinked in genuine surprise. Are you suggesting Minato actually intended for Narumi to control the Kyuubi? Koharu asked. Yes, Naruto mumbled, heavily closing his eyes as a dark memory of a disastrous past experiment forced its way to the surface. But is that even possible? Ka-san. It was the dead of night. As moonlight swept across Konoha's streets and rooftops, a lone shadow moved too fast for the untrained eye to catch. Slipping into the Hokage building through an open window, she silently navigated the dark halls until she reached a secure room, her path blocked by a complex, glowing seal. Silly barrier, the shadow noted dismissively. Her hand blurred through a rapid series of one-handed signs. The seal beamed brightly for a fraction of a second before silently burning away into nothingness. Pushing the heavy door open, she found exactly what she had come to steal. The Scroll of Seals, the first Hokage's legendary scroll, passed directly down to the 5th. One-handed seals. Now that is impressive. It has been years since I've seen anyone pull that off. The shadow whipped around, her eyes widening in shock to find the 5th Hokage leaning casually against the doorframe, watching her with deep interest. It's not that hard. Still, impressive. What exactly are you doing with my scroll, Narumi? Narumi rubbed the back of her head sheepishly, dropping her stealthy facade. Yeah, it's Mizuki. He told me to bring it to him as a secret graduation exam. He is an obvious traitor, so I figured I would just go deal with him. Mizuki, that academy instructor? Naruto asked, highly amused. Seeing her nod, he let out a soft sigh. Just make sure you bring it back safely. It is very precious to me. I know. Hashirama-sama's sacred scroll. Just be safe, Naruto said gently, turning to walk back down the dimly lit hallway. I will be waiting in my office. Narumi was not the type to judge others. She would never dismiss or hate someone simply for being unintelligent. It wasn't as if they chose to be that way. But this guy, he genuinely irritated her. You are the demon fox that almost destroyed the village. Mizuki screamed at the top of his lungs. Narumi just rubbed her temples in profound annoyance. What do you want with the scroll? Mizuki was visibly taken aback by her complete lack of shock or a mental breakdown. Recovering quickly, an arrogant grin spread across his face. You are a smart one, I'll admit. You are going to die anyway, so why not tell you? You are right, tell me. I am going to deliver this scroll to Orochimaru-sama, who will grant me unimaginable power. Narumi blinked slowly. Orochimaru? You mean one of the legendary Sannin? I highly doubt he even knows a loser Chunin like you exists. What did you just say, you little brat? Mizuki roared in blind fury, violently drawing a giant, windmill shuriken from his back. But before he could even launch his attack, a shadow clone of Narumi silently materialized directly behind him. With a swift, precise chop to the back of his neck, she knocked the traitor out cold. Damn, I expected this to be a lot more interesting, Narumi whispered, her eye twitching slightly in profound disappointment as she stared down at the unconscious Chunin. We will take it from here, Narumi. She blinked in surprise as 3 masked Anbu operatives silently materialized in the moonlit clearing before her. Anbu, why didn't you guys interfere from the beginning? Narumi asked, carefully handing the massive scroll of seals over to the nearest operative. Heaving Mizuki effortlessly over his shoulder, the Anbu replied, a distinct note of amusement bleeding through his porcelain mask. Godime's orders. He is watching. Narumi's head snapped up, and she frantically looked around the dark, empty woods, trying to sense a familiar chakra signature. What do you mean? Where is he? I can't sense him. Well, the Hokage has his secrets. Efficient girl, Kakashi mused as he stood behind his Hokage, watching the entire scene unfold within the glowing crystal orb. Naruto nodded, though a disappointed scoff quickly followed. I actually wanted to see her fight. Damned Mizuki, what a weak prick. How do you even use this thing? Kakashi asked with genuine interest, gesturing toward the sphere. I can watch absolutely everything inside Konoha's barrier. The orb is directly linked to it. Oh, wait, everything? Kakashi asked, a distinctly lecherous grin spreading unseen beneath his dark mask. Naruto let out a long, agonizing sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. You are just a weird pervert, aren't you? Next day. I heard you assigned Kakashi to take care of Narumi, Shizune remarked as she leaned against the doorframe, watching her lover carefully examine the back of a man lying face down on the metal examination table. Yes, Kakashi is the one I trust the most. Well, after Jiraiya, of course, Naruto replied, his focus remaining on his patient. I doubt he will even have anything left to teach her. Jiraiya-sama took her training way too seriously. Not to mention, she is a genuine prodigy, Shizune pointed out. First in every single subject. She is the first one since Itachi to achieve such perfect marks, Naruto mumbled, his tone dropping with a heavy, lingering sadness at the sudden mention of the fallen Uchiha. Noticing the somber shift in the atmosphere, Shizune walked forward and pressed a soft, comforting kiss to his forehead. I need to go start my shift. Just try not to overwork yourself with the hospital, you are already the Hokage, you know. Naruto smiled warmly as he watched her leave the room. Staring blankly at the sterile wall for a long moment, a nostalgic thought drifted into his mind. I wonder if Kakashi is going to pull the bell test on them. Excuse me, Hokage-sama. The patient mumbled sheepishly, lying there in complete, awkward silence. Naruto blinked, snapping rapidly back to reality. Oh, right, sorry about that. You look wonderful, my dear, Hiruzen said warmly, his aged eyes shifting between the registration photo in his hands and the young girl standing proudly before his desk. Narumi blushed slightly, rubbing the back of her neck in a sheepish gesture. Thank you, Sandaime-sama. But where is the Godime? Ah, Naruto, Hiruzen sighed fondly, carefully placing her shinobi profile down on the heavy wooden desk. He is currently working a shift at the hospital, so he asked me to take over his administrative duties for the afternoon. Was he always like that? I mean, voluntarily spending all his time at the hospital. Hiruzen noticeably sweat dropped. Of course not. He used to demand new missions every single day, firmly believing he needed to teach those uncultured brutes a lesson. He used to be quite the terrifying kid. Narumi's brow furrowed in genuine curiosity. What was it like, watching a boy do all of those incredible things? Hiruzen hummed thoughtfully, leaning back in the Hokage's chair. As the acting Hokage at the time, it was quite rare for me to leave the village. But when we did fight side by side, it was deeply nostalgic. It actually reminded me of my youth, fighting alongside Hashirama-sama. Wow, Narumi breathed, her eyes widening in sheer awe. Wow, indeed, Hiruzen agreed, a warm, rumbling chuckle escaping him. It was almost like love at first sight for the shinobi who served with him. He was such a charming kid, and always an absolute joy to have around. But, why does he always look so ashamed whenever he speaks of his past? Hiruzen waved a dismissive hand. He is simply overreacting. He was completely fine, and the sheer amount of people he chose to spare is enormous. Let's just say his conscience is working a bit in overdrive these days. Naruto took a deep breath as he meditated atop an impossibly massive tree, one that dwarfed anything found in Konoha. He was deep within the Shikatsu forest. He never quite understood why he always felt such profound peace whenever he was here. Perhaps it was the sheer abundance of nature energy. How nice of you to visit me, Naruto-sama. Katsuyu greeted happily, one of her smaller clones resting peacefully on the branch before him. Naruto smiled softly. I imagine it gets lonely out here for you, Katsuyu. Katsuyu gave a small, bobbing nod. I still find joy in simply wandering around. But I still remember when you and Hashirama-sama used to come visit together. You were so incredibly young back then. Yeah, I remember feeling so annoyed that I was going to be a slug summoner instead of a toad one, Naruto admitted with a bright laugh. He paused, highly amused as he noticed Katsuyu's distinct expression of offense, which was quite a feat, considering she barely had a face to speak of. HMPH. I never forced you to become one, Naruto-sama. Katsuyu scoffed indignantly. Naruto heavily sweat dropped. Right, I always forget you are a woman. Speaking of women, how is Narumi-chan doing? I heard she officially became a toad summoner, Katsuyu asked. Naruto smiled warmly. She is doing splendidly, Katsuyu. She has been asking a lot of questions about the Hokage title, too. How wonderful. Katsuyu cheered. Well, she is Minato-sama's daughter and your little sister. I wouldn't expect anything less from her. Naruto hummed thoughtfully, his gaze drifting over the vast forest. We will see. Next day. Sasuke-kun is going to be on my team, you billboard brow. What did you just call me, Ino pig? Narumi sat wedged between her two supposed friends, violently resisting the urge to smack the living daylights out of both of them. Her frantically twitching eye was a clear sign that she was rapidly reaching her absolute limit. Stupid fangirls. I am going to kill them. But before she could actually commit murder, her savior finally arrived. The classroom door slid open, instantly shutting everyone up as a scarred chunin with a ponytail walked in, holding a clipboard. Students. As of today, you are no longer just academy students but fellow shinobi. Congratulations. Iruka announced proudly, beaming at the class before focusing his attention down on his clipboard. You will be placed into standard Genin squads consisting of 3 newly graduated Genin and 1 Jonin instructor. I wonder who will be on my team, Narumi thought, giving her full attention to her former sensei. Team 7, Namikaze Narumi, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura. Ha, I knew it. True love always wins, Sakura declared cheerfully, throwing her fists victoriously in the air. Naruto laughed out loud as he watched the new graduates through his glowing crystal orb, surrounded by his assembled Jonin. The girls are certainly excited, that's for sure. He chuckled. Kurenai eyed the orb with furrowed brows. I just hope she will be alright. I heard the Yamanaka girl is even worse, Asuma noted, heavily sweat dropping at the chaotic scene unfolding before them. They will grow up. Missions teach manners, that is what my father always used to say, Naruto replied, continuing to watch the projection with deep amusement. Kakashi simply stared blankly at the orb, letting out a long, agonizing sigh. God, you really pulled me out of Anbu for this. So, this is where Sasuke lives, Kakashi said as he stared around the apartment. Naruto nodded as he looked around the clean space. Fugaku was a good father. He raised his sons well. Itachi was the same way, Kakashi agreed with a soft snort. Naruto nodded solemnly. You were his Anbu captain. Please take care of his little brother as well. I can't exactly say I took care of him, he was superior to me, Kakashi admitted freely. His Sharingan, too. Well, Sasuke is talented, but he is not an anomaly like Itachi. You will have fun teaching him. Who knows, maybe you will find yourself a prized student. You know, just like you and Tsunade back in the day, Naruto said as he turned and walked out of the apartment. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask as he stared down at his empty palm, vividly visualizing a swirling Rasengan and the beaming, proud face of Minato. As expected of you, Kakashi. Maybe you will be the one to finally complete it. Minato-sensei. Kakashi whispered softly into the empty room. Narumi would normally be annoyed that she had been waiting for her sensei for 3 hours, and that all the other newly assigned genin had already left with theirs. However, she found peace in the book she was currently reading, The Diary of Konoha Shinobi. It was a collaborative journal written by the shinobi who had participated in the Third Great Ninja War, documenting the events and their brutal experiences for future generations. It was a genuinely amazing read. Funnily enough, her own brother was frequently mentioned within its pages. What a remarkable young lad. Not just in sheer power, but in heart as well. When he decimated the entire Kiri battalion, he encountered one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, one of the few who had narrowly escaped Maida-dai a year prior. The swordsman fought bravely, solely to buy enough time for his young student to escape. Naruto deeply respected such bravery and offered to spare his life, but the man's pride would not allow it. He ultimately committed seppuku. Saddened by the tragic outcome, Naruto buried the man with his own hands and used the sword as a marker for the grave. It was truly heartwarming to realize that the future of Konoha rests in the safe, capable hands of such an amazing human being. Hyuga Hazashi. Wow. Narumi thought, gaping at the page. Was Hiruzen-sama right? Was her brother simply overreacting about his past? Or did he genuinely have moments where he lost his mind? Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted when she noticed an exceedingly familiar, delicate handwriting on the next page. This is Ni-san's, she realized excitedly, eagerly leaning in to read. I will never deny how much I loathe the ways of these uncultured brutes, but I cannot help but be amazed by their jinchuriki. I can hardly comprehend how they are able to control such inhuman power. Which makes me wonder, could the Kyuubi be controlled like this as well? What? Narumi thought, shocked by the profound implications of his words. But she completely froze when a deep, resonant voice suddenly echoed inside her mind. Naruto. He always did wonder about that. Wait, who are you? Narumi demanded mentally. Enumerate the creatures sealed inside your gut, and then you will find your answer, the Kyuubi mocked. Kyuubi, what do you want? Narumi demanded, quickly regaining her mental composure. I am merely bored, and those words caught my attention. My brother, what did he mean by those words? As I said, I am bored, so I suppose I will amuse you, the Kyuubi drawled, though his tone noticeably shifted into something much more serious. Back in the day, he became utterly fascinated by the concept of Jinchuriki after fighting multiple of them in the war. So, he decided to test that theory on Kushina. Kekkei-san. Yes, he believed it would better protect his mother and drastically improve the village's military forces. Placing her within a secure barrier under his and Minato's strict supervision, they intentionally loosened the seal. And well, I would have broken out entirely if he hadn't managed to restrain her. Why would he do such a thing? That is our mother. It is not like he forced her. Not to mention, she certainly didn't mind the prospect of a power boost. Why didn't it work? Because I absolutely refused to share my power with humans. Especially that wood-release brat. He was constantly mocking me. Narumi resisted the urge to roll her eyes at the reason. I bet you hate Nissan. I do, but I respect his power. Only a few humans have ever come close to it. Like who? Senju Hashirama, Uchiha Madara. Even your father was impressive. I never thought I would see a non-Uzumaki with so much sheer talent in Fuinjutsu. I never knew you were so educated. You are actually quite intelligent. The Kyuubi finished for her, a distinct, arrogant smirk bleeding into his mental voice. Yes. Well, as I said, I am stuck in here. So do not panic if I occasionally start rambling. Narumi was about to reply, but the mental connection was abruptly severed. Damned fox. He didn't even let me finish. Unknown to her, it was actually a good thing the Kyuubi had abruptly cut the connection when he did, because the classroom door suddenly slid open, revealing a tall man with gravity-defying silver hair. You guys are Team 7? He asked lazily. Receiving a collective nod from the waiting Genin, he rubbed his masked chin thoughtfully for a moment. My first impression is, you look like a nice bunch. Meet me on the roof. That night. After a simple dinner, Naruto, Narumi, and Jiraiya were relaxing over tea. Narumi proudly wore her gleaming new Hite 8. My student is officially a ninja. They grow up so fast. Jiraiya sniffled, dramatically wiping away a fake tear. Naruto chuckled at his former sensei's antics, while Narumi simply rolled her eyes. I met my Jonin instructor today. He was incredibly late, but he is kind of cool, Narumi said. Wait, you had never met Kakashi before? Jiraiya asked in disbelief. You know him, sensei. He prefers brooding in the shadows, Naruto said simply. Wait, who is he, anyway? Narumi asked, her brow furrowing. He was our father's most prized student. We practically grew up together. He is like a brother to me, Naruto replied casually, completely ignoring Narumi's gaping stare. What? Why didn't you ever tell me this? No wonder he kept staring at me today. I thought he was just a total weirdo. I can vouch for him, he isn't a weirdo. Besides, your main sensei is Jiraiya, you should be more than used to weirdos by now. Naruto teased with a loud laugh. Hey, Jiraiya protested indignantly. That doesn't matter right now. I wanted to speak with you about something much more important, Narumi said, her sudden seriousness instantly grabbing both adults' attention. I spoke with the Kyuubi today. Jiraiya's eyes widened in shock, while Naruto's expression darkened into a deep frown. That annoying fox. What did it say? Narumi didn't know exactly why, but her brother's phrasing deeply annoyed her. She genuinely disliked the way he spoke about the beast. He is not an it. She snapped. Huh. Both Naruto and Jiraiya blinked, thoroughly bewildered by her sudden defense. Well, it is essentially a massive construct of pure chakra. I highly doubt it actually has a gender, Narumi, Jiraiya tried to explain reasonably, only to be taken aback when his student shot him a heated glare. He is a highly intelligent creature. It is not. It is a mindless mass of destruction, just like its siblings, or whatever the hell those things are. Naruto argued back. He physically recoiled when he looked at his sister. Her normally bright blue eyes had narrowed into blue sharp, feral slits. I think you should calm down, Naruto, Jiraiya advised cautiously, immediately noticing the dangerous shift in Narumi's gaze. No wonder he refused to share his power with Ka-san. You are just an arrogant man who treats him like dirt. Narumi exclaimed, drawing a sharp gasp from Naruto. So it told you about that day. It is not what you think, Narumi. That day, You experimented on our own mother. It was not an experiment. She was a Jinchuriki. It was perfectly natural for her to try to safely tap into her Biju's power. She didn't mind doing it at all. Naruto defended himself hotly. Yeah, well, keep acting like an asshole and he will never allow such a thing to happen for me either. What did you just call me? Naruto roared, shooting to his feet so fast his chair clattered violently backward onto the floor. You heard it. That is enough. Both of you, Jiraiya bellowed, rising to his full height. Fighting like this right in front of me. Show some respect. Naruto immediately deflated, rubbing his face as he righted his chair and sat back down. Sorry, sensei, he muttered, before turning a gaze to his sister. Just go to your room, Narumi. With pleasure, Narumi huffed angrily. She spun on her heel and stormed off, leaving a deeply shaken Jiraiya and Naruto behind in the heavy silence. These Jinchuriki, they are always like this. I swear they get unintentionally emotionally attached to their Biju, Naruto mumbled in profound annoyance, harshly rubbing his temples to stave off a brewing headache. Jiraiya stared blankly at Narumi's empty seat before thoughtfully rubbing his chin. Well, what is sealed inside her is specifically the young half of the Kyuubi. Maybe that is why he is easier to reason with. I can't believe you just called it a he, too, Naruto groaned. I admit, she convinced me. It is disrespectful to treat such intelligent creature like this. Whatever. Annoying Jinchuriki, Naruto grumbled stubbornly. Narumi lay on her bed, but her consciousness was no longer in her room. Instead, she stood deep within her own mindscape, right in front of the massive, looming cage. I don't mind the drama. But there was no need to defend me like that, the Kyuubi rumbled. As he stared down at the small girl standing before his cage, he couldn't lie to himself, he was deeply touched by her fierce defense. It was the very first time he had ever experienced such a thing from a human. Narumi frowned deeply. I just hate how he judges things so superficially. He has never even talked to you. Why does he think like that? You know, you are a nice girl. A bit naive, perhaps, but smart too. Yeah, thanks, I guess, Narumi muttered, sheepishly scratching her cheek. The Kyuubi was about to say something else, but his giant, slitted eyes suddenly narrowed. He is here. Huh. Narumi blinked in confusion as she was violently jolted out of her mindscape. She let out a sharp yelp when she opened her eyes to find her brother looming over her bed, staring down at her with wide, shocked eyes. I can't believe it. You actually talk with the Kyuubi, Naruto mumbled in sheer disbelief. He deliberately avoided using the word it. He really wasn't here to start another fight with his sister. How did you know? You were lying there completely motionless, staring blankly at the ceiling with your eyes wide open, Naruto explained softly. Oh, yes, we were chatting. Chatting. Yes, he appreciates that I defended him downstairs. Naruto's face instantly flushed with anger. He appreciates it. Oh, how perfectly nice. Do you need anything else, Kyuubi-sama? He snapped, mockingly addressing Narumi's stomach. Stop it. Did you just come up here to fight? Narumi howled, glaring heatedly at her older brother. Taking a deep, ragged breath to forcibly calm himself down, Naruto tried to explain. No, look, I don't mind you conversing with your Biju. You Jinchuriki are special, especially with your specific seal. Your chakra and the foxes have been slowly mixing together for years. Yeah, I know, the 8 trigrams seal. Exactly. As the years pass, you will eventually possess just as much chakra as I do, Naruto said. He let out a heavy, exhausted sigh and slumped down onto the edge of her bed. I am just highly sensitive when it comes to the Kyuubi. It killed our parents, Narumi. You know that. Narumi completely ignored his use of it, her expression softening into a sad frown. I know, but why can't you just consider that he didn't want to be locked in a cage again after nearly a century of being sealed away? Naruto stammered, entirely at a loss for words. Was the Kyuubi genuinely charming enough to captivate his little sister after just a single conversation? You know what, Narumi? Do whatever you want. Just tell the fox that I will be watching closely. With that final warning, he stood up and walked out, leaving Narumi completely alone in the quiet of her room. Next day. Narumi frowned deeply as she eyed her sensei. Taking a single step forward, she seemingly disappeared, reappearing instantly behind him with a fierce kick aimed directly at his head. So fast, Kakashi thought in genuine shock as he barely brought his arm up to block. He winced beneath his mask. She hit hard, too. Grabbing her by the ankle, he casually tossed her into the air, only to blink in surprise when he saw her rapidly flying through hand seals midair. Futon. Daitapa, Narumi declared, sending a massive, roaring torrent of wind barreling toward her sensei and engulfing him completely. Landing gracefully on her feet, her eyes narrowed sharply when the wind dispersed, revealing nothing but a shredded log of wood in his place. Impressive, Narumi. She snapped her head up to see him casually standing on the thick canopy of a nearby tree. As expected from the Rookie of the Year, you are already at the Chunin level. But, I have other students to play with right now. So, bye. Narumi cursed under her breath as he vanished in a swirl of leaves. This test. It has to be a test of our teamwork. I need to go find Sakura and Sasuke so we can formulate a plan. Arg. Or, maybe just Sasuke. I must say, you guys suck, Kakashi stated bluntly, his single visible eye glaring harshly at his new students. Narumi looked deeply ashamed, Sasuke was fiercely glaring at the ground, and Sakura was tightly bound to one of the wooden stumps. Sakura, you kept running around searching for Sasuke while completely ignoring Narumi. And Narumi, Sasuke, you two simply relied on your own individual skills and never once thought about the true purpose of this test. It was teamwork, Narumi said simply, earning a highly raised eyebrow from her sensei. A little too late for that, don't you think? Kakashi countered flatly. I know. Sorry, she muttered, dropping her gaze. Sighing heavily, Kakashi slowly shook his head. You are all special kids, and it genuinely hurts me to have to send you back to the academy. We will try this one more time after lunch. But hear me now, do not, under any circumstances, feed Sakura. Vanishing in a swirl of leaves, he left the three students to their own devices. Here, Sakura. Sakura blinked in surprise when she saw Narumi holding out her bento box, offering her food. But, Narumi, sensei said. I can't sense him anywhere around here. And we are going to need you at full strength if we want to take those bells, Sasuke stated plainly, holding out his own lunch toward her. Sasuke-kun, Sakura muttered, blushing furiously at the mere thought of Sasuke feeding her. Narumi simply sweat dropped at the ridiculous scene, letting out a heavy, exhausted sigh. However, the somewhat touching moment was violently disrupted when, in a massive puff of white smoke, Kakashi suddenly reappeared, glaring down at them with terrifying intensity. You brats. Sensei. Narumi yelped, shrinking back slightly, while Sasuke merely deepened his defensive glare. I specifically told you not to feed her. Kakashi roared, the sky practically darkening behind him. But we are a team. Narumi shouted back, quickly finding her courage. And a team's job is to always look after each other. Kakashi's deadly glare abruptly vanished, the heavy atmosphere instantly lifting as his single visible eye curved into a bright, cheerful smile. You pass. But why? Narumi asked, completely dumbfounded by the sudden shift in his demeanor. Because you guys were the only ones who didn't blindly follow my orders, Kakashi explained, his tone shifting into something much more profound. Remember this, in the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. Watching the heartwarming scene unfold through his glowing crystal orb, Naruto chuckled in fond amusement. That Kakashi. To think he would ever become such a softie. Right, Obito. Naruto murmured gently, his nostalgic gaze drifting to the framed photograph resting on his desk, a picture of himself standing alongside his father's Genin team. It is a new era. Chapter 12. Always conflicts. Flashback, 15 years old Naruto. Anbu. No, root members. Danzo-sama's Anbu, 11-year-old Shisui said, his voice a guarded murmur. He eyed the three masked figures, tense beneath his dark clothing. He is already poisoned, he won't get far. Do not interfere, you brats, the female operative sneered. The featureless porcelain of her mask reflected the dappled light piercing the forest canopy. I cannot allow you to kill a fellow comrade from Konoha. Shisui planted his feet and threw a protective arm out to his side, his chakra flaring. Itachi, stay back. 8-year-old Itachi frowned. Ignoring the command, he stepped forward, dry leaves crunching beneath his sandals as he stood shoulder to shoulder with his friend. I am Uchiha Itachi. And I will fight with Shisui. Itachi. Shisui exhaled, his eyes widening. Despite the sharp killing intent radiating from their enemies, a proud smile crossed his face. TCH. If you kids are in a hurry to die, so be it, the female operative hissed, her hand dropping to the hilt of her ninjutsu. Before she could close the distance, a new voice cut through the clearing. What is going on here? Shisui and Itachi froze, recognizing the tone. They pivoted to see a tall, red-haired shinobi stepping from the foliage. His initial frown and the heavy aura surrounding him vanished, replaced by a bright smile the moment he noticed the boys. "Oh, Shisui and Itachi, you guys know each other?" Naruto asked, his tone light. He ignored the three root operatives, who had gone entirely rigid. "Naruto-sama," Itachi murmured in surprise. Shisui bowed his head slightly. "We do, Naruto-sama. I help take care of Itachi from time to time." "I see. That's nice." "Naruto-sama, what are you doing all the way out here?" the female Anbu asked, her previous arrogance faltering. Naruto shifted his gaze from the two young Uchiha to the masked assassins. "I was just out here collecting some herbs. Imagine my surprise when I find three root operatives threatening two of Konoha's promising shinobi." "It is not what it looks like," one of the male operatives started, taking a half-step backward. "Leave." Naruto's voice dropped, carrying a heavy, sudden authority that chilled the clearing. But Danzo saw. "I said leave." The three Anbu flinched. Stripped of any other choice, they flickered away, vanishing into the forest shadows. "That Danzo. He's always ruining my mood," Naruto muttered with a sigh. The tension in the air dissipated as he turned his attention back to the boys, his warm demeanor returning. "So, what were you guys doing out here anyway?" "We were running a combat simulation for a mission," Shisui explained, unclenching his fists as the adrenaline faded. Naruto tilted his head in amusement. "A simulation?" "Yes. Have you never done one before?" Naruto chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Ah, I always preferred the real thing." Later, the two young Uchiha and the red-haired Namikaze sat around a crackling campfire. The flames cast long, flickering shadows against the tree trunks, pushing back the evening chill. "It has been a while since I sat around a fire like this," Naruto murmured. The dry wood popped quietly in the background as he stared into the embers, his gaze distant. Itachi swallowed a bite of roasted fish and spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is a waste, though. I genuinely wished to see you fight, Naruto-sama." "Itachi," Shisui hissed, caught off guard by the lack of manners. Itachi blinked, a dusting of red on his cheeks, but his dark eyes remained steady. Naruto laughed, the sound echoing into the canopy. "It's fine, Shisui. Itachi has every right to be curious. I imagine, like most of the new generation, you guys probably believe I am just overrated village propaganda." "Nonsense. Just like every shinobi in the village, we truly believe in you," Shisui declared, leaning forward. Itachi offered a serious nod of agreement. Naruto smiled softly. He lifted his gaze from the fire to the starry night sky. "I'm glad. Peace is really nice, isn't it? To simply get out of bed and walk freely around your own village. It's a beautiful feeling." "What was the war like?" Itachi asked quietly. His hands tightened their grip on the wooden skewer piercing his fish. Naruto was silent for a long moment. The night wind rustled through the canopy overhead. "I cannot even begin to put it into words. But I can say that I truly hope this peace remains." He frowned as his gaze dropped back to the flames. "But humans, they can never just sit around peacefully, can they? Do you want to know what Hashirama Sensei used to say?" Shisui and Itachi froze, the air catching in their throats at the casual mention of the legendary god of shinobi. Wide-eyed, both boys gave a shaky nod. Naruto's eyes mirrored the firelight, reflecting the heavy burden of the past. There will always be conflict. No matter the era. The cavernous darkness of the sealed hideout was illuminated only by the faint, eerie glow of astral projections. The air hummed with dense, pulsating chakra as the spectral forms of the Akatsuki flickered into existence around the dormant husk of the Geto statue. "Intel has arrived." The boy Wonder is wandering around, Pain's voice echoed. His tone was entirely devoid of inflection, but the sheer weight of the announcement sent a visible ripple of movement through several of the surrounding holograms, disrupting the static hum of their connection. "What? I heard he disappeared after the Kyuubi attack," Kakuzu questioned, a rare edge of genuine surprise bleeding into his gruff, gravelly voice. "He defeated the fourth Mizukage, Yagura," Black Zetsu rasped. "We knew he had recently become the fifth Hokage, but we did not expect him to be this active outside the boundaries of his village." "Huh, boy Wonder, that thing is actually real. It's nothing but a damn folktale." Hidan scoffed dismissively, tossing his head back. "Well, for once I agree with Hidan, You can't expect me to believe this nonsense." Deidara crossed his arms, his projection violently flickering as he raised his voice. "Even if he really does exist, there is no way he is as powerful as the tales say." He scowled, having never bought into those exaggerated, fear-mongering stories from that old geezer, Onoki. Kisame gripped the heavy, bandaged hilt of Samahata, grinning widely enough to flash rows of jagged, shark-like teeth. "Ho ho, now this is interesting news. To think that monster is actually real and kicking around." Across the cavern, Itachi stood completely motionless. He said nothing, keeping his glowing Sharingan perfectly unreadable beneath the heavy shadow of his cloak, betraying no shift in his chakra or demeanor. Pain's Rinnegan swept over the assembled criminals, silencing the rising chatter with his oppressive presence. Having him around will cause unnecessary trouble. We will postpone our immediate plans for a while, he declared with absolute, crushing finality. Without another word, Pain's hologram abruptly blinked out of existence, severing the connection with a sharp hiss of displaced chakra. One by one, the rest of the Akatsuki followed suit, plunging the cavern back into absolute, undisturbed darkness. Flashback ended. The rhythmic patter of light rain drummed against the bamboo awning of the quiet roadside tea house. Steam curled lazily from the small porcelain cups resting on the worn wooden table, carrying the bitter scent of green tea into the damp air. To think we will visit Konoha soon. I heard it is a nice village, Kisame said. His tone carried its usual deceptive politeness as he took a slow, deliberate sip of his hot drink, the heavy, bandaged bulk of Samahata resting silently against the bench beside him. It is, Itachi replied plainly, his unreadable gaze fixed on the faint ripples within his own cup. You miss it. Beneath the high collar of his Akatsuki cloak, Itachi's jaw tightened. The sudden, invasive probe into his past irritated him, though his outward composure remained perfectly undisturbed. No. As expected, cold as ever, Kisame chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound in his chest. He set his cup down with a dull clink. By the way, according to intel, the Jinchuriki is related to him. Itachi narrowed his dark eyes by a fraction at the vague mention of the man, though he carefully kept his vocal cadence monotone. His little sister. Kisame grinned broadly, parting his lips to flash rows of jagged, shark-like teeth. Oh, so he is real. Itachi offered a quiet, dismissive scoff. What do you think? I don't know, he always seemed like a terrifying bogeyman to me, Kisame mused, leaning his heavy forearms onto the table. A kid who could create jungles in an instant. They say he could shake the earth itself. Lord Third Mizukage called him God's punishment. Itachi raised a single eyebrow. The violent, apocalyptic moniker felt starkly disjointed from reality. His only memories of the man were of a remarkably gentle redhead moving quietly through the Konoha hospital, carefully healing wounded patients with a soft, reassuring smile. I never knew that. You must have met him at least once. Itachi gripped his teacup tightly, the ceramic warm against his pale skin. He had no idea why he was continuing to humor his partner's morbid curiosity, but maintaining this idle conversation was far better than discussing the grim reality of the targets they were sent to hunt and kill. Yes, but I never witnessed him fighting. By the time I graduated, he became less active. What a pity, Kisame sighed, though the predatory gleam never left his small, rounded eyes. But, since he is the Jinchuriki's elder brother, then we will surely meet him. Yes, Itachi murmured, his gaze drifting out toward the misty, tree-lined road leading directly into the land of fire. Still, I wonder how strong he really is, his sealed younger self from 10 years ago thought. Naruto stood atop the crown of his own carved visage on the Hokage monument. The late afternoon sun bathed Konoha in a warm, amber glow, casting long shadows over the sprawling village below. The persistent, high-altitude wind whipped his red hair around his face. His quiet isolation broke not with a sound, but with the subtle, familiar displacement of air behind him. I figured you would be up here, Naruto, Jiraiya said, stepping out of a silent shunshin to stand behind the redhead. What is it, sensei? Naruto asked, his voice calm, keeping his azure gaze fixed firmly on the horizon. Are you still worried about yesterday? We already anticipated this. It is what Minato wanted, anyway. Naruto shook his head, the movement slow and deliberate. No, quite the contrary. I am actually interested. What did you want to discuss? Have you heard of the Akatsuki? No. They are a group comprised entirely of S-rank missing nin, Jiraiya explained, his tone dropping into a grave, hardened register. Even Orochimaru was with them. Naruto finally turned his head. A deep frown settled on his features, the sudden mention of the snake Sannin darkening his expression. That is troubling. Did you say was? Yes, he recently left the organization. But we should remain cautious. S-rank criminals do not gather together to collect charity. Naruto scoffed softly, a dry, humorless sound. No, they certainly don't. S-rank. That title is handed out to just about anyone these days. We had better be careful regardless. I am going to leave the village for a while, maybe a month or two, to gather more information on their movements. Do you mind? No, I don't. Just make sure you meet with Narumi before you leave. I will. Jiraiya turned, his wooden getup pivoting on the stone to walk away, but Naruto's voice stopped him in his tracks. Sensei. Is there anything new regarding the prophecy? Jiraiya blinked, pausing mid-step, his eyes widening in genuine surprise. I thought you stopped believing in all of that after Minato died. My interest has returned, Naruto murmured, turning his attention back to the amber-lit village below. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. But I need to be absolutely sure first. Later that evening, Naruto stood in the quiet confines of his home, watching through the open window. Down below, Narumi sat in the dead center of the garden, entirely motionless in deep meditation. A light breeze rustled the tall grass around her, but her breathing remained remarkably shallow and perfectly rhythmic. He knew it without a doubt, beneath that tranquil exterior, she was currently speaking with the Kyuubi. A quiet, fond smile touched his lips. He turned away from the glass, his gaze settling on the framed portrait of his father resting on the desk. You believed in her when she was barely a day old, Naruto whispered to the painted, smiling face of the Yondaime. Parents are truly amazing. 3 weeks later. The stifling air of the Hokage's office was shattered by a loud, exasperated groan. Narumi had officially had enough. She was entirely sick of chasing down a violently aggressive, ribbon-wearing cat, of walking unruly, overgrown dogs, and of pulling stubborn weeds until her fingers blistered. Enough was enough. Hokage-sama, please. All I am asking for is some real ninja action. Narumi pleaded, slamming her hands flat against the polished oak of her older brother's desk. Standing a few paces back, Sasuke kept his face perfectly blank, his dark eyes fixed forward. I actually agree with her. Any more of this torture will destroy my sanity, he thought in profound, simmering annoyance. Naruto leaned back in his high-backed chair, letting out a heavy, long-suffering sigh. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Narumi, you guys are only genin. Kakashi, didn't you explain the mission system to your team? Leaning casually against the office wall, Kakashi chuckled nervously, reaching up to sheepishly scratch the back of his silver mane. I did, Godime, but you know how it is. The young ones are always so eager. Naruto dropped his hand and rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his sharp gaze sweeping over the 3 genin. I will admit, this team is exceptional, and you do have Kakashi as an instructor. He paused, weighing the administrative rules against their obvious potential. What do you think, Kakashi? Is AC rank appropriate? Kakashi blinked his visible eye. He slowly straightened up, critically eyeing his 3/10 students for a long moment before letting out a resigned sigh. Sending them out into the real field will certainly help build their experience. Very well, Naruto decided, sliding a fresh mission scroll to the center of his desk. Yes, Narumi cheered triumphantly, throwing her fists into the air. Naruto ignored her celebration, shifting his professional gaze to the masked Chunin waiting by the heavy office doors. Send Tsunade in. Yes, sir. Flashback. He knelt before the freshly turned earth, hot tears cutting unhindered paths down his cheeks. If Sensei saw me in such a pathetic condition, he would kill me, he thought, the bitter realization doing nothing to stem the tide of his grief. I'm sorry, Zabuza. It is all because of me. He stayed behind to defend me, he whispered. He clenched his teeth, his hands curling into tight, shaking fists against his thighs as survivor's guilt clawed heavily at his chest. He chose an honorable end. It is surprising that they bothered making a grave for him, the accompanying Kiri-nin noted quietly. The shinobi stepped forward, his sandals shifting the loose dirt, and gestured to the massive, chipped iron cleaver driven deep into the earth at the head of the mound. Take the executioner's blade. Honor him. Flashback end. Zabuza's eyes snapped open. He lay perfectly still for a fraction of a second, his sharpened instincts mapping the quiet clearing before he slowly sat up. His gaze drifted to the massive, iron bulk of the executioner's blade leaning heavily against a nearby tree trunk, its unchipped surface catching the pale moonlight. He let out a slow, cynical sigh. Too much for honoring, he thought bitterly. The noble promises of his youth felt utterly hollow now. He had become nothing more than a rogue mercenary, a blunt instrument bought and used by the highest bidder. Zabuza-san, they say our target is returning. The soft, melodic voice cut cleanly through his brooding. Zabuza turned his head to see a young boy stepping seamlessly from the dense underbrush, not a single leaf rustling in his wake. He looked at his quiet companion and student, the only steady presence in his fractured life. Reaching out, Zabuza wrapped his hand around the familiar hilt of his sword, effortlessly hoisting its crushing weight onto his shoulder. Then let's go, Haku. The steady crunch of dirt beneath their sandals provided a quiet rhythm to their march. The midday sun beat down on the dusty road leading toward the land of waves, the air thick with the pungent, sour scent of Tsunade's cheap sake. Kakashi-sensei, does Wave Country have shinobi? Sakura asked, her curiosity breaking the monotonous silence. Kakashi kept his visible eye fixed lazily on the path ahead, though his posture remained relaxed. No. Shinobi exist only in the 5 great nations and a few minor lands. The leaders of those great nations are called Kage. The Tsuchikage, Raikage, Mizukage, Keisukage, and of course, the Hokage. Who is the strongest? Lord Fifth, without a doubt, Kakashi replied instantly, leaving no room for debate. Godime-sama is really that amazing. Sakura chirped, her eyes widening. He is the wielder of the wood style and the legendary Boy Wonder. Narumi joined in, eagerly seizing the excuse to brag about her older brother. Boy Wonder, the statue in the middle of the village. Tazuna murmured, taking a heavy gulp from his gourd. Yup, he is my big brother. Humph, the Hokage looked young, so accomplished and young. A nice thing indeed, the bridge builder muttered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. As the casual chatter continued, Kakashi, Sasuke, and even Narumi, who was busy beaming with pride, noticed a glaring inconsistency on the path ahead, 2 distinct puddles of water resting in the middle of the arid dirt track. It hasn't rained for a week. How? Narumi thought, her posture subtly tensing as her hand drifted closer to her weapon pouch. Her instincts proved correct. As they walked past the stagnant water, the surface suddenly erupted. 2 rogue shinobi burst from the puddles in an explosive spray of water and mud, their clawed gauntlets connected by a heavy, serrated chain. You're first, they roared in unison. Before anyone could blink, the chain whipped around Kakashi, snapping taut and violently shredding his body into a spray of mangled flesh and cloth. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura shrieked, paralyzed by the sudden, horrific violence. Narumi didn't waste a single second. She drew a kunai in a flash of dark steel. Channeling her chakra, a high-pitched, vibrating hum filled the air as dense wind chakra coated the blade in a razor-sharp, pale aura. She lunged forward, her enhanced blade severing the rogue ninja's extended wrist like a hot knife through butter. My hand. The shinobi screamed frantically, his eyes wide with shock as he stared at his amputated limb hitting the dirt. His agonizing cries were instantly silenced by a brutal roundhouse kick from the blonde genin that snapped his head back and sent him crashing into the dust. Brother! The second assassin yelled, momentarily distracted by the spray of blood. It was the only opening Sasuke needed. Moving with calculated, clinical precision, the Uchiha closed the distance and delivered a devastating blow to the man's neck, sending him collapsing unconscious beside his partner. A sudden rustle of leaves drew their attention as Kakashi stepped casually from the nearby tree line, completely unharmed. Where his shredded body had been, only the splintered, ruined remains of a wooden log lay tangled in the chain. Well, nice job Sasuke. And Narumi, you surely have killer instincts. A nice execution, Kakashi complimented, his lone eye trailing down to the severed hand bleeding out into the dry soil. Narumi rubbed the back of her head, offering a nervous, remarkably ordinary chuckle. Just got excited. Kakashi suppressed a shudder. This carefree attitude after cutting off an arm. She really is Sensei's daughter, he thought, a drop of sweat forming beneath his Hitai-8. Sakura, though immensely relieved to see her teacher alive, was too busy gaping at the blonde girl in profound shock. Amazing. If you were alive, why leave brats to handle it? Tazuna demanded, his drunken stupor entirely vaporized by the adrenaline of the ambush. Kakashi shifted his gaze to the bridge builder. The lazy, accommodating demeanor vanished entirely, replaced by the hardened, piercing glare of a veteran Anbu. We need to talk, Tazuna-san. The small wooden boat cut smoothly through the dark, mirror-like water. A thick, oppressive fog clung heavily to the surface, swallowing the distant shoreline and dampening the rhythmic, hollow splash of the boatman's single oar. The damp chill of the land of waves seeped into their clothes as they drifted deeper into the mist. Gato. So this is the real issue, Narumi muttered, breaking the tense silence. She rubbed her chin thoughtfully, the cold moisture collecting on her skin. Still, you could have told Ni-san the truth. I am sure he would have understood. Tazuna frowned, his heavy shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt and exhaustion. He stared down at the damp floorboards beneath his sandals. I am sorry for causing trouble. Kakashi kept his visible eye fixed on the impenetrable gray wall of fog ahead, his posture relaxed but his senses quietly sweeping the area for any shifts in ambient chakra. The damage is already done, he stated evenly. Now, as Konoha shinobi, it is our duty to see the mission through. That's right, we are not here for the money. We will save your country, Tazuna-san. Narumi declared passionately, her vibrant voice cutting sharply through the gloomy, muffled atmosphere. Hey! The boatman hissed frantically. His grip tightened on the wooden oar as he shot a terrified glare over his shoulder, his eyes wide with genuine dread. Lower your voice. If Gato's men hear us in this fog, we are all dead. Narumi blinked, the sheer panic in the man's expression instantly deflating her outburst. She chuckled nervously, reaching up to scratch her cheek in a sheepish gesture. Yeah, sorry. Tsunade panted heavily, the harsh rasp of her breath filling the decimated training ground. The earth between them was violently churned, marred by massive, smoking craters from their brutal spar. She eyed the redhead before her. He was visibly fatigued, but far from her level of exhaustion. Wincing sharply, she gripped her bruised shoulder. Damn, Naruto. You hit hard. As always. Naruto chuckled, his sandals crunching softly over the broken earth as he closed the distance. He placed a steady hand over her shoulder, a soothing, emerald-green chakra instantly flaring to life beneath his palm. I learned from the best. I will never get over Oji-sama and yourselves. It is magnificent, she whispered in genuine awe. She watched the deep, purple bruises on his own arms knit together and fade without a single hand seal or conscious effort. It is. But you can easily match us with your Byakugo, Naruto offered, keeping his focus on mending her torn muscle tissue. Tsunade snorted softly, the tension bleeding out of her frame. Stop trying to make me feel good. Tell me, Tsunade. I wanted to ask you something. What is it? She asked, rolling her shoulder experimentally as she stood up straight, the agonizing ache entirely erased by his jutsu. Do you think Shizune expects me to propose to her? Tsunade frowned thoughtfully, her amber eyes searching his face. I must say, every woman her age does. But she is waiting for you to take the first step. Naruto said nothing. He turned his gaze upward, staring into the vast expanse of the sky. He was so vastly different from the kid he had been 10 years ago. Was he really ready to fully commit to someone like this? His parents were married at 16. But that was only due to his mother getting pregnant by mistake. I will think about it, he finally murmured, a soft, genuine smile touching his lips. Tsunade smiled back, the fierce Sannin softening into a quiet, familial warmth. Chapter 13. Yes. Flashback 11 years old Naruto. The campfire crackled sharply, sending a brief, fleeting shower of orange sparks spiraling up into the dense, darkened canopy. 12-year-old Shizune rested her chin heavily in her hands, her dark eyes fixed on the dancing flames with a bored stare. Why are we still going on border patrols? She asked, her voice carrying a quiet, adolescent whine. Naruto sat across from her, the flickering light casting long, dancing shadows across his features. With a flick of his wrist, he rotated the wooden skewers planted in the earth, ensuring the meat of their caught fish roasted evenly over the coals. Well, he murmured, it is not exactly like our neighbors are highly trustworthy people. Especially those Suna bastards. Shizune released a heavy, long-suffering sigh. She picked up a stray twig and tossed it into the glowing embers, watching it instantly catch fire. Makes sense. Still, I had been planning to hang out with Kurenai and Anko this week. Naruto blinked. He paused his rotation of the skewers, lifting his azure gaze to look at her through the thin veil of wood smoke. I thought you enjoyed hanging out with me. Shizune's eyes widened. A sudden, vivid blush dusted her cheeks, completely shattering her bored, apathetic facade. She sat up straight, crossing her arms defensively over her chest. Of course I do. But you know, it is a girl thing. Naruto offered a quiet, highly amused chuckle, returning his attention to their dinner. Well, right now it is a shinobi thing. The girl things can come later. Shizune just huffed loudly. She turned her head away to glare pointedly into the dark tree line, though the lingering red on her face entirely betrayed her faint irritation. She left the highly amused redhead to tend to the fire in the peaceful quiet of the forest. A few minutes passed, the silence broken only by the steady popping of dry wood and the distant hum of cicadas. Shizune finally peeked back over her shoulder, her stomach giving a traitorous, quiet rumble. Aren't they ready yet? Flashback end. I should have known, Shizune muttered. She tipped her shallow ceramic saucer back, downing the warm sake in one bitter gulp. Sitting across the small tavern table from her childhood friends, Kurenai and Anko, she let the cup clatter softly against the wood. I am nothing but a childhood crush to him. He didn't even notice that I let my hair grow out. Anko scoffed, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms. I remember you saying he loved your old haircut. Maybe that's why he didn't say anything. Kurenai shot her purple-haired friend a sharp glare. It is not as if he will suddenly hate her because she changed her hair, Anko. What are we, kids? Geez, why are you attacking me? Anko muttered, waving a dismissive hand and looking away toward the bustling bar. Shizune traced the rim of her empty cup, her voice dropping to a quiet, exhausted murmur. I know he is the Hokage. I know he is incredibly busy. But, I am 25 years old. You are expecting a marriage proposal, Kurenai offered softly, her crimson eyes softening with quiet empathy. Shizune's brow furrowed, a rare flash of genuine frustration breaking through her usually placid demeanor. Isn't it my right to expect one? Of course it is. Enko interjected loudly. She leaned across the table, slinging a heavy, fiercely supportive arm around her gentle friend's shoulders. And Godime knows it very well. Just wait him out, Shizune. Kurenai nodded in agreement, her dark hair shifting around her shoulders. Enko is right. Naruto loves you. Just be patient. Shizune said nothing. The ambient noise of the tavern, the loud clanking of ceramic mugs, the low, steady hum of off-duty shinobi unwinding, faded into a dull, distant roar. She just stared down at her distorted reflection in the residual drops of alcohol pooling at the bottom of her cup. Loves me. Shizune frowned deeply, her dark eyes fixed on the man sitting behind the massive oak desk. He was completely buried in towering stacks of mission reports, the steady scratch of his calligraphy brush the only sound in the quiet room. Last year, he had officially appointed her as his first assistant and director of the Hokage Tower. Every active shinobi and administrative worker within the building fell directly under her jurisdiction. He had told her, with absolute sincerity, that he trusted no human alive more than her. Is that it? Just a trusted assistant, she thought bitterly. She ruthlessly suppressed the sting of frustration, slipping a cool, professional mask over her features. Her heels made barely a whisper against the polished floorboards as she crossed the office. Reaching his desk, she cleared her throat to snap his attention away from the ink. Naruto blinked, his brush pausing a hair's breadth above the parchment. He looked up, his azure eyes focusing on Shizune and the massive stack of new paperwork balanced in her arms. Shizune, is something wrong, dear? Godime, perhaps you should take a break. I am fine, Naruto replied, offering a tired but warm smile. Also, please don't call me that. It feels incredibly weird coming from you. We are currently in the Hokage's office, she stated flatly, dropping the heavy barrage of files onto the only clear space left on his desk with a solid, resonant thud. Oh, Naruto murmured, momentarily taken aback by her unusually sharp tone. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before his eyes suddenly widened. He pushed himself up from his seat in genuine amazement. Wait, is your hair longer? It was the absolute last straw. The carefully constructed professional mask violently shattered. You just noticed, she hissed, a dangerous, simmering anger flaring in her dark eyes. What? Naruto stammered, entirely unprepared for the sudden hostility radiating from her. It has been 2 months. Naruto shook his head defensively, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. No way, I definitely would have noticed. Just tell me the truth, Naruto. Stop making me live inside my own foolish dreams. Shizune demanded. Hot, angry tears blurred her vision as she stepped sharply around the desk, jabbing her index finger hard against his chest. Naruto stood completely perplexed, his instincts utterly useless against the volatile emotional spike in the room. Huh? Do you even love me? We are not children anymore. Be brave enough to admit it. Of course I love you. You are the love of my life. Naruto insisted frantically, his panic rising as he scrambled to salvage the situation. I really like the hair, by the way. You are absolutely intolerable, Shizune yelled. Without waiting for another word, she spun on her heel and dashed out of the office. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind her, the violent impact rattling the frame and echoing loudly down the corridor. Naruto simply stood there in the sudden, deafening silence of the office, utterly astonished and out of his depth. He reached up, slowly scratching his cheek as he stared blankly at the closed doors. Is it her time of the month? He mumbled to the empty room. It was a mistake to come back. Shizune yelled, her voice cracking as it echoed off the wood-paneled walls of the Sannin's office. She paced frantically before her master and surrogate mother, who sat frozen behind her cluttered desk, utterly astonished by the sudden, volatile outburst. Tsunade pushed her chair back, the heavy wood scraping loudly against the floorboards, and stood up to approach the distraught Junin. Just tell me what happened. He just noticed my hair. What? Tsunade snapped, her amber eyes widening in genuine disbelief. You are kidding. I am not. Shizune wept, aggressively wiping the hot tears from her cheeks with the sleeve of her dark kimono. I don't want to see him anymore. I don't even love him. Tsunade released a heavy, exhausted sigh, stepping forward to place a hand on her trembling student's shoulder. Just calm down, Shizune. I should tell her about his proposal, Tsunade thought, the memory of Naruto agonizing over the decision flashing through her mind. But it is not my place. What if that idiot actually decides not to go through with it? I would just be selling the poor girl empty dreams. Pulling up a sturdy wooden chair, Tsunade gently guided Shizune into it before dragging her own seat around to the front of the desk so they sat face to face. Shizune took a shuddering breath, staring down at her tightly clasped hands in her lap. Back then, I was completely starstruck by him. He felt like someone entirely unreachable to me. Yeah, I remember, Tsunade murmured softly, resting her elbows on her knees. He had half the girls in the village swooning over him. I wasn't the most beautiful or the coolest kunoichi around. But still, I was so unbelievably happy when he actually fell for me. Shizune's hands curled into tight, trembling fists against her skirt. But I cannot stay happy just clinging to something that happened 15 years ago. Why not? Confront him. Shizune's head snapped up, fixing her master with a fierce, tear-filled glare. You want me to ask him to marry me? I have my pride too, Tsunade-sama. I didn't say that, Tsunade defended herself immediately, holding her hands up in a placating gesture. I don't know, Shizune. He loves you. Just wait around a little longer, he will come to his senses and come for you. I said it already, Shizune hissed, turning her face sharply away to hide a fresh wave of frustrated tears. I do not want to see his face. I am just turning into that goofy geezer. Naruto mumbled, burying his face in his palms as he sat across from Hiruzen. No, even Hashirama sensei would have noticed something like this. Hiruzen nodded slowly, his aged features obscured for a moment as he released a thick, fragrant puff of pipe smoke into the quiet room. Mito-sama was a truly gorgeous woman. He was completely starstruck by her. Yeah, I know, Naruto agreed softly, dropping his hands to his lap. But Shizune is not less woman than her. She is everything I ever dreamed of in a partner. Beautiful, supportive, calm, and incredibly relaxing to be around. Why not marry her, then? Hiruzen asked simply, his dark eyes sharp and steady beneath his wrinkled brow. I was planning to. But now, Naruto groaned, running an exasperated hand through his red hair. I mean, 2 whole months. How could I possibly not notice her hair growing out? I must admit, this is quite disastrous, Naruto, Hiruzen noted, a dry, grandfatherly chuckle vibrating through his chest as he tapped the residual ash from his pipe. Naruto shot the older shinobi a flat, unamused glare. He held the stare for a long moment before the tension bled out of him in a heavy sigh. Pushing himself up from his seat, he stated firmly. You were right, Hiruzen-sama. It is time to man up. Naruto released a tired, heavy sigh as he walked through the familiar quiet streets of Konoha. Reaching the Senju mansion, he stepped up to the heavy wooden door and rapped his knuckles gently against the frame. He didn't have to wait long. Less than 5 seconds later, the door snapped open, revealing a fiercely glaring Tsunade. Here to fix your mistake, she demanded, her amber eyes burning with protective fury. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, a nervous sweat prickling at his collar. She told you already. Of course she did, she is an absolute mess. Tsunade scolded, her voice sharp enough to cut through kunai wire. She hasn't left her room since she got back. A deep frown creased Naruto's features showing genuine guilt. Is it really that bad? Go and be a man. Tsunade ordered, jabbing a harsh finger toward his chest. Your father married your mother at 16 to fix his mistake. You can at least face this head on. Naruto sighed again, the sheer exhaustion evident in the slope of his broad shoulders. Can I come in and fix the problem, then? Tsunade's glare held for a fraction of a second longer before she finally nodded. She stepped aside, allowing the red-haired Hokage to cross the door. As she pulled the heavy door shut behind him, the latch clicking solidly into place, she spoke. I will be in my study. Yeah, Naruto murmured, his gaze already shifting down the quiet hallway leading to Shizune's room. Leave her to me, Tsunade. Naruto walked silently down the dim hallway. Reaching her door, he knocked softly once before gently pushing it open. The room was dark, and Shizune lay curled on her side, facing the far wall. The quiet, muffled sound of her sniffling hit him like a physical blow, instantly shattering his composure. I don't want dinner, Tsunade-sama, she murmured, her voice thick with tears. Leave me alone. It's me, Shizune. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the bedroom. Then, she turned around sharply, her dark eyes red-rimmed and suddenly blazing with defensive anger. What are you doing here? Naruto frowned, stepping fully inside and quietly clicking the door shut behind him to seal them in. Keep your voice down, he urged, keeping his own tone steady. We are adults. There is no need for Tsunade to hear our problems. Oh, you care so much about secrecy now. How manly. Shizune mocked in a harsh whisper, throwing her arms up in sheer exasperation. Naruto let out a rough groan. Completely ignoring her clear lack of approval, he sat down heavily on the edge of the mattress. He kept his back to her, staring at the opposing wall as he spoke. Since when are you so dramatic? Shizune narrowed her eyes, the sheets rustling aggressively as she sat up. That is what you dreamed of, isn't it? Shizune, the quiet, obedient housewife who will never say no to you. Well, guess what, Naruto? I am not like that. Naruto was immensely glad she was maintaining the harsh whisper rather than outright yelling. He turned his head slightly to look over his shoulder. I never thought of you that way. I have always respected your perspective. Have I ever forced anything upon you? Shizune's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her glare hardened entirely. No, but your actions say otherwise. Like what? Like sleeping with me, she hissed. Her voice trembled, a volatile mix of deep embarrassment and raw anger coloring her tone. I was always against doing such a thing before marriage. But I trusted you. Naruto turned around fully, fixing her with a genuinely incredulous look. Oh, come on, that was a mutual mistake. We were just caught up in the heat of the moment. Just leave my room, she demanded, looking away. Let's go have dinner, he offered instead. A small, tentative smile touched his lips as he reached out, his fingers wrapping firmly around her hand. Are you mocking me? She whispered fiercely. She pulled back, trying to break his hold, but his grip remained an immovable, steady anchor. Just shut up and let's have dinner, Naruto demanded, his voice dropping to a low, completely earnest register. Allow me to fix my mistakes. Shizune ceased her futile struggle against his unyielding grip. She stared down at his fingers wrapped securely around her own, her dark eyes still shining with unshed tears. Releasing a shaky, defeated breath, she finally relented. All right. She looked back up at him, her gaze hardening with a lingering, protective spark of pride. Just so you won't blame me for whatever happens in the future. Brown rice. Your favorite, Naruto said cheerfully, taking a seat beside her at the low dining table of his home. The rich, earthy steam of the freshly cooked dish filled the quiet kitchen. Shizune looked genuinely impressed, her dark eyes darting from the steaming bowl to him. You cooked this? Sure did. Naruto grinned, resting his elbows on the table. If I don't cook for my girl, who else am I going to cook for? A faint blush dusted Shizune's cheeks, though she fought to maintain her stern, defensive expression. She picked up her chopsticks and took a small, hesitant bite. Instantly, her eyes widened. This is delicious. I learned the recipe years ago, Naruto admitted, a softer, fond smile replacing his grin. I knew a moment like this would happen eventually. She paused, her chopsticks hovering over the bowl. Are you not going to eat? Naruto just smiled at her and pushed himself up from the table. Wait right here, I need to get something. Shizune nodded slowly, watching his retreating back as he bounded up the wooden stairs. She shifted nervously on her cushion, the heavy silence of the house making her suddenly acutely aware of her own heartbeat. She managed a few more gentle bites of the rice before the steady, familiar thud of his footsteps signaled his return. Setting her chopsticks down neatly across the rim of her bowl, she watched him approach. Then, without a word, he dropped to one knee beside her cushion. Shizune released a sharp gasp. She instinctively tried to stand, but Naruto reached out, his hands gently catching her shoulders to keep her anchored in place. Let me do the talking, Naruto murmured softly. He reached into his pocket and produced a simple, beautifully crafted silver ring. The metal caught the light of the kitchen. Ka-san left this behind for exactly this moment. Naruto. Shizune stammered, her hands flying to cover her mouth. I do not want you to do this just because you feel forced into it. Naruto let out a rich, genuine laugh, the sound entirely devoid of his earlier hesitation. You silly woman. You are the love of my life. You are everything I have ever dreamed of in a partner. You are the only woman I truly see and appreciate. Naruto. Shizune whispered. Her dark eyes swam with a fresh, overwhelming tide of tears, blurring the sight of the Hokage kneeling before her. Shizune, I am so sorry, he continued, his azure eyes locking onto hers with absolute, unwavering certainty. I am sorry I didn't do this years ago. But I finally found the courage. He held the ring out, his steady hands a stark contrast to the chaotic beating of his heart. Shizune, marry me. The last of her defensive pride crumbled. The tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Yes, Shizune cried out. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder as she tackled him into a desperate, crushing embrace. Naruto caught her instantly, wrapping his arms tightly around her waist and burying his face in her dark hair. Well, that was easier than I expected, he murmured against her skin. He pulled back just enough to look at her, a teasing, affectionate grin breaking across his face. And seriously, your hair is really nice. Shizune let out a wet, teary laugh, the sound vibrating through the quiet kitchen. She leaned forward, resting her forehead heavily against his. Just forget about the hair, damn it. I love you. I love you too. This is my girl, Enko declared, slamming her ceramic teacup down onto the wooden table with a loud, resounding clatter. First she nailed the boy Wonder, and now the fifth Hokage. Kurenai let out a quiet, long-suffering sigh, resting her chin in her hand. They are the exact same person, Anko. Yeah, whatever. The special Junin cheered unabashedly before aggressively biting a sweet dumpling off her dango skewer. Shizune simply beamed. The quiet, radiant happiness completely erased the bitter, exhausted tension of the past few weeks. She lifted her cup, taking a gentle, soothing sip of the warm green tea as she entirely regained her usual, composed self. You were right. I just had to wait. Kurenai offered a warm, affectionate smile, her crimson eyes softening as she looked at her lifelong friend. I told you, didn't I? He loves you. He even gave you Kushina-sama's ring. Shizune nodded. A genuine smile touched her lips as she subconsciously brushed her thumb over the cool silver band resting on her finger. She shifted her gaze toward the open window of the tea shop, her dark eyes settling on the towering Hokage monument in the distance, lingering specifically on the stone face of her fiancé. I cannot wait for Narumi to come back from her mission so I can tell her.